underpinnings are, and I haven't looked at the bylaw, but you have the ability to grant relief under 40A6, certainly, and under your bylaw. My point is that if there is a withdrawal or if there is a request for negative action, you certainly can accept the withdrawal and you can give negative action. But if you give negative action, you cannot then give an opinion with regard to the ownership and control issue that then binds the zoning officer. So I think that the prior speaker, the point that he was making was that if you give the positive action and give the relief that was sought in the first place, if you're comfortable doing that, that may resolve the issue.
I'm more comfortable with that.
You're what?
I'm more comfortable with the positive than...
Yeah, I am too, ultimately. Okay, so can someone make a motion to that effect? So, time out. You're okay with a positive motion?
If you do a positive motion to grant the relief requested to allow the demolition, then I would be happy with that.
Having said that, if we were going to get there as a board, do we want to condition it in terms of it isn't ensconce it? I don't.
And that the attorney for the applicant stated that there was no common control, and the trusts are separated. It's different beneficial owners to both trusts.
Works for me.
I
don't know
would,
that
even under the current conditions, if you granted me a special permit to allow the demolition on the back house, limit it by no work in the summer, limit it to the design that we've given you, which is HDC approved, all that stuff, and it'll be conforming to all ground cover, setback, all zoning requirements, the new structure. That would be
You're
something.
okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Susan? Lisa? Yeah? Okay? So can someone make that motion? No? Sorry. Somebody. You want to make a motion? No? Okay. Feeling a little frustrated. I'm feeling a little hung out here.
No, I'll support that motion.
I guess Michael made the motion. Will somebody second it?
I'll second.
All right, Kieran seconds. Kieran's not sitting. Who sat on it?
I don't think I honestly don't think I sat on this. I did not. I don't think I
Lisa
sat on
doesn't.
this.
Let's take another time out.
Really?
Lisa doesn't think she sat on
I thought I'd
it,
sat-
and Kieran thinks he does.
I don't think I sat on this.
I did sit on this one.
I think that's incorrect. That's why I was late, because I was like, I don't know.
I know
what
you.
to hear.
You told me that earlier, and that's why I was surprised to see it.
Oh, we're correct. Karen, you sat on it. And Susan took Michelangelo's position.
And did I sit?
You did not.
All right. So having
God,
said
I was
all
going
that,
crazy. That's why I didn't want to make a motion, because I was like, I'm not that.
Got
comfortable
ya.
with this.
okay,
Thank you. I'm gonna.
we're looking good so far today.
Off to a good start.
So Michael made the motion. I seconded
You
it.
seconded it. The five of us are voting. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Feel notified at least that I'm not going crazy.
All right. Moving on to new business. 0116 Ann N. Apgar and Malin Apgar, trustees of 22 Broadway Trust, for the applicant.
I can sit off on this if Jim or Jeff want to sit.
Jim,
just as
Jeff, you want to sit on this, or are you good? They don't seem that interested. No.
No, I just.
Okay, let's keep going. So who is sitting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mark's not sitting. Go ahead, Paul.
Paul Jensen for the applicant, 22 Broadway Trust. I'm here for a special permit to allow the addition. We want to construct a dormer on the second floor that will be flush with the existing building, and it just is a going up inside the setback. This entire structure is in the town of, in the village of Sconset, with the ways that surround it that were on an old plan, and this we're adding. Basically, we're trying to meet. There's a bathroom that is being renovated, and we have to meet the building code, and that means the walls have to go up a little bit. It is not going to be more non-conforming. It is an increase in volume of the building that is in the setback area, but that is it. And we ask that you grant the special relief to allow this construction to proceed.
So no new foundation, nothing,
No new foundation,
just the dormer.
Just the little dormer.
the little dormer.
Okay.
And it faces, this side of the building faces an unconstructed way. This is those grass paths that go, they act pretty much as side yards. It's not near another structure.
And the immediate abutter has written a letter in support?
It's still five
Yeah.
feet away, too, from the center line of the way. Yeah, so I don't have an issue with this.
Okay, you good for now? Is there anybody in the audience who wants to talk about this one? No. Board members? Seems pretty straightforward to me. What about, do we want to impose a condition of no,
Anybody in the public?
I asked?
Oh, you did.
Yeah. No construction in the summer?
I think so, in this
Exterior.
location.
No exterior construction, Memorial Day to Labor Day kind of thing? Okay, will somebody make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Does anybody want to second it?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? No, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. You're good.
I'm good.
Yes, thank you. That was unanimous. Okay. 216, Donald G.
Mark, you want to sit?
All right, wait a minute.
No. No, you go ahead. Yeah. I think, I'm not sure.
All right, Michael's going to take a break. Jeff or Jim, why don't you sit on this one? All right, so we ready? This is who is sitting. 216, Daniel G. Conahan, 11 Swain Street for the applicant.
For the applicant, Paul Jensen, Daniel Cunahan, this is an application for a special permit to allow us to pick up this house and move it forward and put it on a new foundation because we have to raise it above flood level. It's not going to have a full foundation, and we are going to keep the setbacks, which I think are about half a foot on one side and about 2.5 feet on the other side of the lot. And we'll keep that exact same distance. The house is not changing on its sides at all. It is just moving forward. And the foundation is not a full foundation, but I think we have to go down to footings that are 4 feet below the ground and then come up and create a blowout so the floodwaters can go underneath the house. And I'm seeking special permit to allow this because it is in the setback area.
All right, the plan shows that there is a proposed addition.
There's a small addition on the back, but it will conform to...
That's not what's shown here, so.
Well, let's see.
I mean, it'll be the same, but it won't conform, at least according to this.
I think you're right.
non-conforming.
It's a special permit both to move it forward and to extend it. We're going to be extending on the back. That's a mudroom addition, actually, on the back of the building. And that's by special permit also. We can extend the nonconformity.
Right.
We're willing to, again, do all the work in the summer. All the work not in the summer. We'll do it all in the summer when everybody's here. No, we're going to not do the work during the summer.
Okay. Another pretty straightforward situation. Does anybody have a comment?
I don't have a comment or a problem with it.
Does anybody in the audience want to talk about this one? No. Okay. So if we don't have any comment, and
I'll make a motion to approve the application as requested with taking into consideration the dates that we normally do for summertime.
okay.
Second.
Well,
And then
and just one other issue. I mean, the shed will be moved.
Yes, the shed will be moved.
That's part of the decision. Okay.
Moved or
Removed. It will
Removed.
be removed.
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 And we're including the no further intrusion in the setbacks without further relief.
Yes. The normal. Anything else? No? Did you make a motion?
Made the motion.
Yeah.
Jeffrey seconded.
Jeffrey seconded. Okay, all, any further discussion? No, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. 3-16. Brant C. Gould and Gabrielle M. Gould, 15 Margaret Way. Who's sitting on it? The five of us? Good? Okay, for the applicant.
Stephen Cohen for the applicant, and I'll note that the Goulds are here. This is a situation where the pool and pool equipment are as close as about 1.6 feet from the setback in one location and about 2.5 feet in another location, just a little corner of each. And the bylaw provides for a special permit relief to cure these unintentional encroachments at this level. The issue that we're dealing with is that Mr. Gould, who's a builder by trade as well as a restaurateur, took a licensed survey from Blackwell and Associates and measured off his deck to find to pin the pool, and had done so in a way where he didn't think that there was going to be any problem. But when Dynasty Pool came out, they thought it was a little too close to the deck and scooted it over enough to cause him a terrible headache, unknown to him. So we have a situation where not the entire pool, but just the little corner of the pool and then the pool equipment, which was set based on lining up with the pool, are unintentionally minorly over the setback line, which is 20 feet. I would note that in this neighborhood, the closest house is more than 350 feet away, and there's fairly heavy screening, and they can't see the pool or the pool equipment due to the vegetation in the distance, and there are actually pools on other properties that are closer to the closest neighbor than this pool is. And that the immediate abutter on this side of the property has submitted an email through staff saying that they are both in support of the relief and would even be willing to do a land swap if necessary, although we think that's more complicated. In this case, solving the problem would cost well over $100,000 to fix the pool and probably another $15,000 or $20,000 to fix the pool equipment. Because they're not visible, because the abutter is in support of the application, and for the other reasons provided in the application, we'd request that you grant the relief. I would also note that there's several sheds on the property, and that one of them that's 34 square feet is within the southern setback, and that is scheduled to be removed, and we'd have no problem with a condition requiring that to happen. Removed from the setback, not from the property.
Relocated.
Relocated, yes. Brought into conformity.
Okay. Does anybody have any comment on this? I'm not sure I buy into the reasonably based deciding on the engineer argument. I mean, that was meant, I believe, that the engineer does it and he makes it a mistake. Not that you take an old plan, pace it off, and decide where the pool goes. So, having said that, I don't have a huge problem with it, but it's not the one where the surveyor made the mistake. But anyway, it's
Just
just me.
out of curiosity, Stephen,
Sure.
if Dynasty Pools messed up, essentially, wouldn't they be held liable for that and go into their insurance?
They don't take that position that they moved it. They take the position that they put it in, where the marks were. But that's not, once they found out that there was a problem, they certainly weren't saying, yes, we definitely, moved the pool from where you told us to put it. But that's what we think happened. It's certainly possible that they put it where Mr. Gould put the marks and that it's his fault too. We don't really know. But there was a conversation on the lot where they said, we think this is a little close. We might, but
I find it very hard to believe, Stephen, that the subcontractor would just decide on his own, it's too close to the house, let's move it. So, I mean, it's easy, they're not here to defend themselves, but,
yeah.
I think we could probably leave that out of the argument.
Even if we leave it out, I still think it qualifies, and that the cost and burden of moving it is essentially astronomical compared to the incursion and the support of the abutter.
That may be the case, but again, I don't think it's fair to throw the subcontractor under the bus when he's not here to even.
It is unknown exactly how it happened. Mark,
Well, you
did
said in your presentation that the Dynasty Pool decided to move it because it was too close to the house. I just find that hard to believe.
Or the homeowner mismeasured. I don't know what happened. We don't know what happened. All we know is that.
Well, I'm aware of that, but you said something.
Yeah, the pool was measured off the survey, and is now the little corner of it in the setback.
The homeowner here, you said?
He's here.
How was the pool equipment? Yes, wait 1 second. How was the pool equipment located?
The pool equipment was located based on the sight line of the pool, and also based on where the screening is on the property. There's natural vegetation there that blocks the view of all the abutting lots.
So moving it further from the lot line it wasn't going to be vegetatively screened anymore?
What do you mean?
I don't understand your argument, is what I mean.
I don't know that enough attention was paid to where the pool equipment was located. But the problem is moving it, a foot would cost $20,000.
I doubt it. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. We're not trying to.
You just go to the mic and identify yourself, please.
We are not trying to blame Dynasty Pool. There was, we did measure off of the deck. We thought we were measuring properly. Brandt contracted this himself. In terms of the pool equipment, it was based in the line of the pool, again, thinking that corner was within line of the setback. And if you were out at the house, you would see that there's a lot of full vegetation, full trees that have been grown. Therefore, putting the pool equipment, it's kind of like, not a glade, but there's a little almost perfect roundabout for the pool equipment to go in. Therefore, you can't see the pool equipment from either of the abutting neighbors. And then you can also see it from the house that's overlooking the pool. So what we were trying to do is keep it as attractive as possible to everybody in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 years ago, we had a pool issue like this come before us in Pulpus. And we asked that the homeowner at that time spend some time discussing a land swap with the neighbor. And we left it sitting out there with them. I don't think they ever came back to us to resolve the matter. I'm not sure what happened in disposition of that. But it was something that we thought was something worth pursuing. Sounds like the direct abutter would be willing to help them solve this problem. So I'm just going to put that on the table.
We've also, I believe, out in Wigwam Road or
That's correct.
somewhere granted this relief in the past.
That was more of a surveyor condition, was it not?
I think the surveyor was at the meeting.
A surveyor
Fell on the
came to the
sword.
meeting and
Yep.
fell on the sword. I don't remember the details.
Mr. Chairman, I think that perhaps the difference between those two is that not all of them qualify for this special permit, and that the board is more hesitant to grant variances for the obvious reasons.
Well, is there anybody else in the audience who wants to talk about this one? No. What's the pleasure? Or does anybody else have a comment? I mean, it's unfortunate. I don't think the pool equipment moving would be $20,000.
Yeah.
PVC pipe, but generally. But having said that, I don't know if there's huge benefit to it either. I haven't seen the site and don't know about the copse of the tree, the copse of trees.
Would it make sense to continue this so we can see the site?
I don't know about spending the time. Do you think it's going to materially change your opinion?
Perhaps not mine.
Right. Kieran? It's just,
How does the rest of the board feel?
I think I'm more voicing my ongoing frustration with the notion of these
Completely
types
agree
of
with that.
things. But, I mean, if you knew you were going to be within even 3 or 4 feet of the lot line, it probably made sense to get a surveyor to do it.
I think they've learned that lesson.
You know, and the pool equipment, yeah, everybody would like to maintain their trees where they are, but it doesn't give you the right to put stuff in the setback. So anyway, I'm just one person, so.
I mean, I'm willing to overlook it. However, I also want to make a note that I don't want to see Stephen or any other attorneys coming in here with this similar application that the homeowner did it. I mean, in cases like this, they have to get a surveyor and stay in line with what the surveyors put out. Otherwise, this is what happens.
In Stephen's defense, I'm sure he wasn't involved early on and
Well, we don't have to
counseled
get
them to save a few dollars.
Yeah, you know, frankly, I do get Karam's point, and to your earlier point, Ed, is that the current bylaw says the allows for the reasonable reliance on a survey, and I think that language may not be as tight as you read the intent of it, as you know, because I actually agree with you that the why was put in there was that the surveyor messed up, but that's not actually what the bylaw says, and you may want to discuss with your staff having that tightened up so that the relief is less available.
Okay, because I'm fairly certain
But
that
after this.
Yeah, that it meant reasonably relied on a survey meant the surveyor came out, did the work, and somehow a mistake was made in between.
Right.
And not, you took an old plan, took a tape measure, and said, "Oh, we're close. Let's put this in." So,
Yeah, no,
that
I
don't agree
think
with.
that's a fair point, because I think a lot of these cases are essentially caused by the fact scenario where the owner is measuring off a licensed survey and thinks that it's reliable when the reality is,
I suspect the licensed survey was reliable.
No. Tape measuring off a licensed survey is not an advisable thing to do. Doesn't really work.
Do you have a copy of the plot plan that was approved with the building permit application? Did the pool grow at all during the construction process?
No.
Do you have that? Do you have that information? Was the pool put where it was permitted?
I'm sure it wasn't in the sense that the application would have shown the pool outside the setback.
One can only hope.
Yeah. In most cases, a building permit would not have been issued if the pool had been shown as in the setback.
There's also a matter that it looks like the fence is over the lot line.
It's not our fence.
It's
Looks
the
like
pool
it's a
fence.
that's attached to the pool.
So then the
It's built into the privet.
Yeah, the fences are allowed to be in setbacks, but if you'd like to have it
in setbacks, but it's shown over the lot line.
Yeah, well, the encroachment, while not an issue for the board, could be remedied.
I would think you'd want to remedy that. Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I don't know. It seems like an inch or two, but
Okay. Anyway, what's the pleasure? We have to move on. If somebody's ready to make a motion, I'd be excited to hear it. Or not.
I'll make a motion to approve relief as requested.
Okay. And no conditions, just they have to at least move the fence
I
out
think
of
they need to move the fence
onto
onto
their
their property.
property?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems reasonable.
Absolutely.
relocating the fence and that 34 square foot shed as a condition would be more than
I
acceptable.
don't see the 34 square foot shed. That's
It's-
not on our property. It's not on
Yeah, it's on there.
It's in the southeast.
It's on page
Way in the
65.
bottom.
You're way on the bottom right.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm happy to accept those
Tiny shed.
conditions.
Yeah, that would be good too.
All right.
So, motion to approve moving the fence onto their property and moving the 34 square foot shed out of the setback.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right. Any motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? 4-1.
Thank Thank you.
Yep. All righty. Now, let's get to the meat of the... So, let's determine who's sitting on this. Mr. Thayer is not. So, somebody doesn't have to sit in this group. So I'm going to vote not to sit.
I probably won't be at the February meeting. I am willing to listen to the tapes.
I believe Mark won't be at the
I will
February
not be
meeting
there either.
also, but there is the possibility that because our consultant has conflict with Thursdays, that we may or may not have to schedule a special meeting. Just FYI, and if I don't want to be rude, but I'm just going to check to see if the consultant is available. He is. Can you dial? I screwed up last time. I couldn't
I
get
think
it
I
to work.
screwed up. I can figure out how to do that.
The meeting's February
It's
11th.
freezing.
It's gotten cold again.
So it was hot when we first got here.
I don't know.
It's going to heat up pretty quick right now.
That's
Donald, I don't know.
Have to chill the audience down.
I'm frozen.
Oh, God.
Come on, man.
Is that Marchand?
Hey, Ed, it's Ed.
Hey, Ed.
So we're just getting started.
Oh, great.
Okay?
Great. I'll just listen in.
Yep, thank you. Just for everybody in the audience, that's Ed Marchand. He's the ZBA's 40B consultant. He couldn't be here today, so we will listen in on the phone. So anyway, Ed, just test 1, 2, 3. Can everybody hear Ed when he speaks?
Test 1, 2, 3.
Plus or minus? Yeah. Yes. Okay, thank you. So anyway, who doesn't want to sit?
No,
I usually don't get this.
You want me to? Because I'm not going
I'd
to
be
be
more
here.
than happy.
Well, you're a regular member. You're a full member. You probably should sit.
I'm an alternate, so.
All right. So the 5 of us right here.
It's-
Okay. Okay, we're going to get started then. This is 0416 Donald J. McKinnon, trustee of Nantucket, 106 Surfside Realty Trust, a.k.a. Surfside Commons 40B, 106 Surfside Road, for the applicant. Somebody come down and introduce yourself. Oh, there you are. I'm looking over there.
It's good.
This is just a
Good,
sort of an
good
outline.
afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Thoughts.
Just wanna make sure
Yep.
this is okay. I'm DJ McKinnon from Atlantic Development, also trustee of the trust on this application for Surfside Commons. Appreciate being able to meet with the board, talk to the residents, and get the process started for this application. With me here today is Steve Schwartz, who will be speaking from Goulston and Stores, Josh Swirling from Bowler Engineering, Margaret Murphy, as well as Arthur Reed, our local counsel on this. The site we're talking about is 106 Surfside Road. We've filed a 40B application for a 56-unit rental community on this property. As some people know, we've been involved in some other commercial development on the island, and as part of that have become aware of the tremendous need for affordable housing, and particularly in the rental sector on Nantucket. And as a result of that, have been searching for some time for sites that would be considered appropriate for a rental community, and as a result, have set our sights on this 106 Surfside Road property. As part of our analysis of the housing and an approach towards moving forward with this, we have gone through the Nantucket Workforce Housing Needs Assessment that came out earlier this year. It was done by Housing Nantucket. It articulates the need for affordable housing on the island, the severe shortage of that, as well as approaches to be able to move forward to help address that need. And one of their specific recommendations was to work through a 40B process to try to achieve that. So that's a lot of what brings us here today. We're looking forward to starting the process. This is the first meeting. We realize there'll be many meetings following this. So, and as a result of those, we'll be getting into much more detail. At this time, what I'd like to do is actually just get right into the kind of a quick overview of how we meet the conditions for filing a 40B and kind of a quick overview of the 40B process. I know the board is very familiar with that, but I know we have a fair amount of people in the audience that may not be. So I was going to actually ask Steve Schwartz to come up and do that part of it. And then following that, have Josh Swirling come up and give an overview of the development itself. So with that, I'd like to just move on with Steve. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Schwartz, Goulston and Storrs, counsel for the applicant. Thank you for hearing us today. I'm just going to spend a moment, and I know that the board is fully aware of this and very well advised by counsel and by your 40B consultant, but just take a moment to kind of describe the process from our perspective, maybe for the benefit mostly of the folks in the audience. We obtained a project eligibility letter from Massachusetts Housing Partnership dated December 1st. That is really the first step in the 40B process. MHP made certain findings in connection with that project eligibility letter with regard to the appropriateness, general appropriateness of the site, and design of the project, the eligibility of the applicant to qualify for the subsidy program, control of the site, and other findings. Certain of those issues, the board will want to get into the design of the site, et cetera. Some of them are demonstrated conclusively by the issuance of the PEL, namely the eligibility of the project for the subsidy program and the control of the site. So that's been conclusively determined now by the subsidizing agency. Sometimes describe the site eligibility letter as sort of the ticket to the dance, and here we are at the dance. We have filed what we hope is a complete application to the board to start the process. As the board knows, there's the regulations specify a 180-day period within which the board needs to consider our application and various components of it. That time period can be extended with the consent of the applicant if there are remaining issues. One of the issues which I'm sure will be of interest to the board and which I've seen has already been discussed is the question of waivers. Our approach on waivers, my belief on waivers is, 40B as distinct from a 40A process where you need to satisfy certain statutory conditions for a variance, for example. I think the waivers follow the plan. That is to say that what we're going to be discussing is the appropriateness of the plan, the issues of concern within the 40B statute and regulations of safety, health, environmental, open space design. And what flows from that is the waivers flow from that. That is, if we need waivers in order to build that plan, then we should obtain those waivers. If the board has expressed concern and we're not able to reach agreement on the plan itself, then the waivers that we've asked for that we need might be in question. Under the regulations, we're not required to obtain waivers from special permit requirements. So, for example, if there's an overlay district that requires a special permit, that doesn't require a waiver. That's subsumed within the 40B process itself. What we've tried to do, and what we generally try to do, is be pretty over-inclusive in our list of waivers, although we may, in the course of time, determine that some of these waivers may not be necessary. I'm not sure if the board has in mind to undertake peer review, and we can get into that and the scope of that. We would appreciate the opportunity to work with you on that if that's the board's desire. And generally, what we're here to say is we, as DJ said, we realize this is the first of what is going to be many hearings. We are very interested in working with the board, with town officials, hearing and learning from the abutters what their concerns are and seeing if we can work out an acceptable solution for this project. So with that, I'd like to turn it over now to Josh to walk through the design of the project.
Thank you.
Hi, Josh Swirling, professional engineer with Bowler Engineering. So we prepared the site plans that are included within the application, as well as the drainage design. The proposal includes the construction of 4 multi-family buildings with a mixture of 15 and 13 units in those. So two of those buildings will have 13.
Just take a brief time out. Obviously, the audience can't see this. Is there any way we could, maybe Eleanor's going to see if there's a easel or...
I'll try seeing.
We have an easel. We'll set that up.
Great.
Or I can just hold it.
Either way. And we all have plans, so...
Would you prefer the audience?
Yeah.
So I'll point to some things as I go here.
Yeah.
Give one of my drawings.
Yeah, or we can certainly put a set of plans on it. You can come down and take a look if you want, if you're not hearing something or not on... But we are just in the very big, broad stroke, brush stroke overview. So, sorry to interrupt, but go ahead.
Well, quite all right. Thank you.
So can anybody... one more time. Everybody in the audience see that now? Within reason? Yeah? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So, again, construction of 4 buildings, 2 of which will contain 13 units, and the other 2 will contain 15 units. There will be a clubhouse and pool area with an amenity package for the residents there. The on-surface parking includes 92 spaces with 8 spaces available, garaged in tandem at the rear of the site. We have, as I had mentioned, we have included a drainage report in this. It has been peer-reviewed by Pesci Engineering, and they have concluded that our stormwater drainage design is adequate, although there will be as the project moves forward through the process, there will need to be more engineering details provided. But the concept of the underground infiltration system, the soils that we tested out there, witnessed by Pesci Engineering Associates, all show that there's adequate capacity there. We have utilities generally available within the area. We're going to be running a low-pressure force main out to Fairgrounds, the intersection of Fairgrounds and Surfside. Likewise for water, that's the nearest water location that we would be tying into is at Fairgrounds. We have had a coordinated review with town staff. Fire has determined that there's adequate room to maneuver emergency vehicles throughout the site. We have here before you a conceptual landscape design which shows the intent of where we're proposing, the nice low shrubs, the more the taller trees and ornamental trees versus street trees for shading and the like. And we've identified where trash would be located. We've identified locations for handicap accessible spaces. And the details in the plan have a lot more information in them relative to erosion sediment control, conceptual utility designs and configurations on the property, all of which, again, will be further detailed as the project moves forward.
Okay. Thank you.
So really, we wanted to keep this presentation very brief and answer any questions the board may have, and if you want to open up to a comment from the abutters and other interested parties. So that really concludes our presentation.
Okay. Has anybody, or have most of the people in the audience seen the schematic drawings of the buildings themselves?
Has anyone not seen them?
Has anybody not? That's a better question.
Do you want to come up and look?
Or do you want to go? Why don't you give us a brief architectural walkthrough of what you're proposing?
I can give a brief overview. We actually don't have the architect with us here today. We recognize this was the opening hearing, and part of what we're hoping to do today is to try to understand the process that you want to move forward. I know in a lot of these 40B hearings, we tend to have hearings that are focused on certain topics, whether it's architecture, traffic, and those elements. So, we're happy to get into more detail at that point in time. But I can kind of give an overview.
Of
Yep.
what you're proposing.
So I'm going to kind of turn as I look here so I can look at the plan. So the intent of the plan is to try to take our buildings, which are 2.5 to 3.5 story buildings, and try to soften them somewhat along the street corner. So we do have, what's represented here is, and it is shown in the smaller plans that were part of the package, we actually have Surfside Road in the very front. We've purposely, for this presentation, removed the street trees that exist along Surfside Road. So if people are familiar with, most people seem to be familiar with the site, and if you actually drive out there today, there is a driveway centered right at the entrance that you can go in. And you'll see the street trees are generally probably, I'm guessing, kind of 20 feet high in the front. So there are trees all along the front. That existing buffer will remain. Actually, I can show it a little bit here. This actually shows the buffer that's in place today. So the buffer would remain, but we took them off for these purposes. And then what we've done is the buildings that are closest to the street, so we have the thin end of the buildings closest to the street, we've tried to drop the scale of those with the roof design that the architect has proposed, trying to keep more in keeping with the area, and then essentially brought up the elevation of the buildings as you move back into the site. So this streetscape along the front, these are essentially a 2.5 story design. We're utilizing space in the first floor, the second floor, as well as in the roof section itself. So we actually have three floors of living within the 2.5 stories. The treatment of the buildings at this point is basically wood shingles, asphalt roofs, trying to keep in with typical type of building materials that are used here on Nantucket. The buildings in the back have a drop-off on the lower side, so there's actually a lower level on these two buildings, and that's how we're able to increase the unit count to 15 units on those. So we actually have units in the back along these corners. But again, they have a similar treatment with the, it's all wood shingles on the walls and asphalt shingles on the roof. Again, the design is still, the intent of 40B is you submit more preliminary and schematic plans. As the process moves forward, they get more refined with further details and input. The plans have been sent out to the various departments throughout the town, and there will be comments and review that comes in from the various departments from the town, and with that, we'll take that information, look to the plans, and see where we can, add more detail and add more definition to them. So it's kind of the quick overview.
Okay, thank you. It's my intention or hope that we'll just basically get into the details as they come up, and there's any number of issues that need to be discussed. So does the board want to say anything at this point, or would we like to go to the audience, or should we identify some of the major concerns, thoughts that we might have on an initial basis?
I'll start off by saying there's a letter from the Board of Selectmen dated November 5th, and I'm pretty much in line with everything they've said with that. If anybody has a chance to read through that, they made the points, they made bullet points, and other than that, I'd want to hear from the audience.
All right. Why don't we do this? The Board of Selectmen letter that Karen's referring to, you may or may not have seen it. It's a letter that was written ostensibly by the Board of Selectmen to Mass Housing regarding the project eligibility letter. It was simply the Board of Selectmen's opinion, if you will, in summary, that there were some issues, and that Mass Housing should consider not issuing the project eligibility letter. However, they did issue the project eligibility letter, and that's why we're here now. So I think some of the highlights of areas of concern that may come up are density, the overall design in terms of how it fits in with Nantucket, parking, which relates to density. The site plan has any number of issues that we'll go over through the next 180 days or however long it takes us to get there in terms of setbacks, understanding about there are some grade changes out there that I want further clarification on. A traffic study was included in the application. Mr. Schwartz asked us whether or not we would be doing or interested in peer review, and the answer is definitely. We'll be having peer review. In other words, we will get our consultants or consultants that we hire to basically vet or render an opinion on what the applicant has submitted. So all of that is going to be taking place. It hasn't taken place yet, so because it wasn't appropriate. Traffic, I mean, again, that relates back to density in some regards. Stormwater drainage is another one. The sewer, there is a question about the sewer and whether or not we as the Board of the Zoning Board of Appeals can or give the right to tie into the sewer. We'll hear different opinions on that. Right now it is not in the sewer district, so there's some question there.
I'd be interested in hearing Ed Marchand's opinion on who holds the key to the sewer, because I'm sure every attorney here and perhaps Eleanor might have their own opinion on who holds that key.
Ed, do you?
I appreciate the input from me, but I would defer to your town council on that.
Okay, Ed, you were a little muffled there, but what Ed said was, you want to repeat it?
Yes, I would defer to your town council on the question of the extension of the sewer district.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, our town council, who spoke earlier in the meeting, is Ilana Clark. She's out down front. She's here to help us and the town ostensibly. So the sewer is another question. And then the waivers in general, as the applicant stated, there is a long list of requested waivers, some of which may or may not end up being germane, depending on what else takes place in terms of tweaking the plan. So, all of that will be discussed, and everybody will get a chance to talk about the overall and/or the specifics. There was, I also want to just say something about the coordinated review. There was one meeting, it was very preliminary. We will be requesting, and at that meeting, I was not there. What's that?
You would not be there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be there. I'm just letting everyone know. There were various town boards, not boards as much as offices represented, as was the applicant, and it was, again, it was very much broad brushstrokes, and there will be further input from DPW, fire department. I don't think so much the police department, but the planning staff, the HDC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all this stuff's open for discussion. Nothing is sacrosanct, so I guess we'll get to it. So does anybody in the audience want to speak about this? Okay. Just the procedure is I'll recognize you. Just come down to the microphone. You have to identify yourself so the people at home who are watching and listening will know who you are. Okay, go ahead, please. I will point at you, and I'm sorry because I don't know everybody.
Deborah Timmerman, 20-year resident of Surfside, Very few issues get this many people to a hearing. I think it's indicative of our dislike of this whole project. Surfside is the only area in the island to have received all of the 40Bs and affordable housing to date. It's an unfair burden to put on one area of the island. All of us that bought in that area, I bought over 20 years ago, 2-acre zoning, rural, according to the town master plan, it is countryside, and this is totally, totally inappropriate, both in scale and in the area it is. It will drastically change the whole feeling of the island, well beyond Surfside. This is beyond the sewer district, and we have very carefully hammered out at various town meetings where the sewer could be added on to, always very minimally, because we put a lot of money into the sewer plant that is expected to last X number of years, and all of this additional usage would certainly shorten the life of it. $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment is not affordable. It's just not. I couldn't afford $2,000 a month. It's more than my mortgage. I think this really, the town is finally working on affordable housing. 20 years ago when I came here, nothing was being done. It was very clear that there was a big issue. All these people used to live, umpteen people to a house, and everyone looked the other way. The cost of real estate now doesn't allow anybody to do that. We need to, and they are working on it now. The planning people, the administration of the town, the Board of Selectmen are all aware that they have to do something, and we are doing it. This is not the right thing to do, and especially not in a 2-acre rural setting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll just continue. Is there anybody else who wants to talk about this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I am attorney Peter Fenn from Newton, Massachusetts. I represent the Nantucket Land Council and have for about 35 years. I do not want to particularly address the specifics today. It's a little premature to do that, except generally as the applicant has. This will play out as 40B proposals do over several months. Obviously, there'll be a lot of controversy over this. We all know that. It's a very dense project on a very small site. I do want to speak to a couple of issues generally and then urge a course of action on the board. First of all, I believe that the question of extending the sewer will probably have to go to town meeting. I don't think that gets played out here, but that will be a question between council, and your attorney will opine on it, as will others, I'm sure. But that's something that will have to be addressed, because I don't think this project can be built without a sewer extension. Secondly, obviously, we know it's a very tight site, a very small site, in an area of the island which is, as the previous speaker stated, fairly rural in character. The Land Council, as many of you know, has been involved at length on abutting property. The 100-acre Boy Scout campsite is next door. It's been an object of opposition to developers' plans to develop a third of that site, and coincidentally was the same developer, Mr. McKinnon, who was attempting to buy 30 acres of that from Boy Scouts on Cape Cod, who did not actually own it. And we have been very involved as the Land Council in protecting that site, along with an incredible outpouring of community support to support rural landscapes in that area. That is right next door. This is 2-acre zoning. This project obviously is unlike anything else nearby, but these are issues that will play out over the next few months, and we're not going to address really the details of substantive issues today. I will note, however, this is in the Wellhead Protection District, and that also merits your concern. I also would respectfully disagree with Counsel from Goulston, who thinks that the question of site control has been determined by the Mass Housing Partnership. This site was augmented by the developer's acquisition of, from the town, paper streets that made it larger fairly recently. The deeds from the town contain restrictions on use. That will be a question of legal opinion, which will have to be decided as well. That is site control. Can the developer do on this site things that are restricted by deed on the site? This will have to be determined. Those are all issues really that can't be addressed fully today, along with many, many other issues. We appreciate the fact that a consultant was apparently retained not by you, to do a very preliminary review of certain stormwater matters. It's not binding on you, and we don't think it's adequate. It was a very brief review of what's still a preliminary plan. 40B, and specifically aspects of it, allow you to do whatever peer review you think is appropriate to be paid for by the developer. And we think you need to do that, and we urge you to do that. In particular, if you'll give me just a moment. In particular, we think you need a hydrogeologist, an engineer. You should have a stenographer here recording all these proceedings, because it's probably going to be appealed one way or another, both to the Housing Access Committee and to court, no matter what you do, whether you approve it, whether you approve with conditions, whether you deny it. You should probably have a title expert through town council or otherwise, and these are matters that can be paid for by the developer, should be paid for by the developer, and must be paid for by the developer according to statute. So we would urge you, please, to obtain whatever peer review of whatever aspects of this project you think are necessary for you to review in your role as guardians, if you will, of the interests of the people in Nantucket and as the 40B permanent authority here. We will be submitting to you a recommendation for what consultants we think would be appropriate, not telling you who to hire by any means or who you should hire, but just what we think might be available that might be useful to your deliberative process. We expect this will be going forward for quite a while. We are here, we see our role as the Land Council, I think most of you know who we are, to do whatever we can to assist you in your review to come to an appropriate determination on this project, to approve it, to disapprove it, to approve with limitations, however you obviously feel is within your purview to do so. Our goal is to assist you in doing that, and then hopefully support you and support the town in whatever decision it makes. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on one point, Terry, are you basically a stenographer? You're taking detailed notes as?
I take detailed notes for the towns if they want me to transcribe the audios. I've done that in the past.
Okay. Ms. Quirk, I mean, is that adequate? The audio tape? We've never had a stenographer.
Mr. Chairman, there would be no requirement for a certified licensed stenographer per se. However, in the event that one or more members had to miss a meeting and needed to rehabilitate themselves under the so-called Mullen Rule, then you would have to rely upon a videotape, an audio tape, or a transcript. And the transcript, would be necessary if there isn't an audio or a videotape. But I think you are videotaping, are you not?
We are.
So I would not see the need for a stenographer. Occasionally, a developer does bring in a stenographer and does transcribe all of the, with a licensed stenographer, essentially. That can happen, but I don't see a need for it.
Okay. Just Mr. McKinnon, what's your or Mr. Schwartz? What's your feeling on the stenographer issue?
We have no particular desire or see particular need for a stenographer.
Right. As Terry mentioned, we are on tape and on audio tape. I mean, it would seem adequate to me. Those tapes can be transcribed. So I'm not sure about that one. The other issue that you brought up in terms of peer review in general, we'll definitely be doing that, and
I just want to comment on one thing, and I don't mean to get into a rebuttal, just on the issue of site control. That the regulations are clear that that is an issue that is conclusively determined by the subsidizing agency. So I'm quite confident about that. That's 760 CMR 56.04. It's in the regulations, so that I do not believe is within the purview of the board, and I have not seen a peer review for title issues in any event, and the regulations are also clear that any legal expert is not a peer reviewer that can be, the applicant can be asked to pay for.
I would agree with Attorney Schwartz. Site control, the presumption that site control exists is determined by the project eligibility letter, and certainly in the event that there is a dispute between private parties over control, that is a private thing that can continue and will, if it's appropriate, go forward in the future. I do always mention in the event that there is a dispute of this kind, though, that it can certainly be looked at by the board, not because the board has jurisdiction, but if there were something new or different that had not already been presented to the subsidizing agency, then certainly it can be worthwhile. I've done that certainly many times in the past on behalf of a board, to send off information to the subsidizing agency to say, look, a new deed has come to light, or something new has come to light that was not considered by the subsidizing agency. And so something of that sort, if it did come forward, it would be worthwhile to look at, certainly, and perhaps contact the subsidizing agency.
Do we know that the subsidizing agency is aware of this?
I believe that the specific issue, I believe that was raised earlier, I believe that certainly the council did send a letter to the subsidizing agency, I believe, on that very point.
Thank you.
Yeah, the subsidizing agency received a letter directly from the Nantucket Land Council, I believe, that stated their case.
Prior to the Pell letter.
Prior to the Pell letter. Now, again, I don't know what happens up at MHP, but I assume that they took it into consideration. One question I have on the site control issue is, if through discussion we felt that there wasn't site control, would it be a reason to not necessarily deny, but to say, why are you here? You don't have control, or that issue is not in our jurisdiction at all?
In my opinion, it is not within your jurisdiction per se. However, I certainly, as recently as last night, at a different meeting, the issue came up again, frequently does. And so what the board does, if there's new information, it's certainly fine to gather it and to have counsel, perhaps on behalf of the board, send it off to the subsidizing agency so that the subsidizing agency is aware. For instance, an example might be if a developer goes into bankruptcy, you see a foreclosure happening, so that there is a serious site control issue. Certainly, it's perfectly appropriate at that point to write to the subsidizing agency. But again, not within your purview, not within your jurisdiction per se.
Thank you. So I guess what I would think we'd want to do is, if someone in the audience feels that there's a site control issue, we would need to hear their argument. And if our counsel thinks that warrants a letter to MHP, so be it. But it would have to be some new, I assume, it would have to be some new information for MHP to consider it. And is it often that MHP would rescind a Pell? You might as well stay there.
I have seen it happen perhaps 3 times where information has come to light during an application, or sometimes even after the application is at fruition and relief has been granted, where there is a serious loss of control, again, because of a bankruptcy, another because of a foreclosure, and the bank did not step in to take over the project. So it's very limited, but certainly always worthwhile. You don't operate in a vacuum. I do agree with Attorney Schwartz. You don't have jurisdiction to deny because of project, site control issues. However, again, they are of interest, and certainly people can be heard. And in the event that you hear something that you think is worthwhile to send off to the subsidizing agency to say this is something that you should look at and consider, that's certainly appropriate.
Okay, I think I get it. Hold on one sec. No, I was talking to Linda, but whatever. As a board, do we want to try to get this issue fleshed out today? And if there's somebody in the audience who thinks there is site control issues, at least hear their opinion as to why it might be an issue, and determine if somebody wants to send a letter to MHP.
May I make a suggestion on that
Yep.
point? I would recommend that with respect to all of the issues that are going to be raised as the board moves forward, in order to make sure that the process is deliberate and measured, that you encourage each individual who has an issue of that type to reduce it to writing and to present it to the board so that it can be thoroughly examined, and then the board can vote once you have such a, certainly people are not precluded from making verbal comments. That's not the case, and certainly you can take those into account. But once you have the specific information, then you can look at it and make a determination as to whether you want to send a letter.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I guess what I was getting at is if it didn't seem like there was even any reason to get to the written portion. Hey, Ed, that's your phone ringing.
I'll try to kill it.
I don't know how to mute it.
He needs to press mute on his end.
Like Michael's watch.
Okay, we're good.
I'm
Sorry
glad you
about
didn't ask me about that, because I have no idea what to do about that.
Just ask Ed to press mute on his end.
Good point. I think we're good. Go.
But certainly, if the issue is as raised by the council in its letter to previously to the subsidizing agency, if you want an opinion from town council about it, I can certainly provide one.
Okay.
And at the same time, I'm sure that Attorney Schwartz, on behalf of the applicant, would provide one as well.
Okay.
I think that would be.
Okay.
Because I definitely
If I
would
could
like
make
to
a
flesh it out.
comment.
Please. Go ahead, Ed.
This raises an example of a concern that could be a critical issue. There are a number of issues that are going to be raised, and what you want to do is determine which ones are critical issues.
Okay.
This could be one because site control is one of the three fundamental requirements for proceeding with a 40B. So I would recommend that this one be addressed. Obviously, the sewer district extension is another critical issue. If the critical issues don't get addressed in a timely manner, they really create an inefficiency in the entire public hearing process because people will sort of hang on to that. Very often, traffic appears to be a critical issue, but once the peer review is done, there's a determination that although it will certainly have an effect, based upon a peer review, it really will not create a public safety issue. So again, I agree with Alana that let's try to reduce it to writing. Let's try to resolve it as quickly as possible in terms of site control.
Yeah, well, that was my thought, but I guess it will be at the next, I will ask ultimately, probably at the end of this meeting, that after we've identified some of the bigger bullet points, please submit additional information.
I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out, there's been a lot of talk of site control, and I just want to make sure that the board members in particular are aware of what it is that we're talking about specifically. So there are on three sides of the property there. The town of Nantucket actually deeded per, I guess, a fairly common practice here, a private interest in private way to the applicant, to the owner of the site. And the specific question that was raised was not so much whether it's properly owned by the applicant, and it's not the site as a whole, it's just the area, those three areas, but the allowable use for those three areas. The deed from the town specifies that it will be used for residential use. The Land Council's letter stated, I think incorrectly, that it was restricted to single-family residential use, which the deed does not say. That issue was, so to speak, fully briefed. There was a letter to the MHP. We responded. I assume if there's something new, that can be presented, but I don't really see that, and I respectfully disagree with Mr. Marchand to the extent he's implying that this is a critical issue. I don't believe it is a critical issue. I think it's pretty much resolved. On the sewer issue, obviously that is a significant issue, and there is a difference of opinion between ourselves, between myself and Ms. Quirk, and I frankly don't. I'm hopeful that we can convince her of the correctness of our position, but I'm not holding my breath. So I'm not really sure what more can be done on that. We'll keep on working at it, but that's sort of where we are.
Okay, I mean, part of the process, though, is I want to help. I want to make sure the audience, the neighbors, don't, as Ed said, well, either hold on to something because it's real, or let's clear the air on some of these things that may or may not be true issues.
And
So.
that's what I was trying to say. If neighbors feel it's a critical issue, then despite, I'm not saying it's a critical issue, I'm saying neighbors feel it's a critical issue, and therefore it's important to address it.
I agree.
And it might be easy to address.
True. Okay, we have someone at the microphone. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Peter Fenn again. My understanding is MHP determines ownership in terms of site control or the right to acquire ownership. They sometimes look at a purchase and sale agreement as opposed to actual ownership. There's no question the applicant has demonstrated ownership of the site. The question is, under what circumstances was some of the ownership of some of that site, which is to say the old paper streets, acquired from the town, and what representations were made to the town as to what that single family, as to what the residential use meant. Now, if that is going to get litigated, it may get litigated. It may be well to dispose of that before this board, the applicant, spend a lot of time and money on a project that may ultimately not be buildable if that issue is resolved in a way that's inimical to the applicant's standards. So site control in that sense, I think, has not been determined, which is site control in the sense of can you do what you want to do on this site, or are you restricted from doing that? I would also agree with your consultant, Mr. Marchand, that other issues should be dealt with up front, which is why we would urge you to get the appropriate peer review people you need, a traffic engineer, a financial consultant who can educate us all on whether this project meets the 40B constraints and is financially viable. You may want to have an architect who can talk about whether the plans as drawn are consistent with the architectural standards on the island, and so forth. And again, I will submit a list to you and delineate these issues and others because I think it's appropriate to put it in writing. I understand you don't feel the need to have the applicant pay for a stenographer at this time, and that's your decision, of course, but if you want that, it's available to you, I think. It's your determination whether you think that's appropriate. But I do think site control in terms of being able to demonstrate the ability to build what they want you to permit is critical and is the critical path, as your consultant has suggested, along with some of the other consultants that you may want to have for your peer review.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to emphasize again, though, that I certainly do agree with Attorney Schwartz that the eligibility for the applicant to be here with regard to the site control issue is established by the project eligibility letter. And if indeed there were some new information, and certainly if this writing comes forward, I think it should be looked at carefully. And if there is some new information that the subsidizing agency did not have before it, and that perhaps it would be worthwhile to have the agency apprised of it, a letter would be worthwhile. Okay. But I don't see it as a critical issue to this proceeding to revisit a determination that the subsidizing agency essentially has already made. And as I mentioned, in the event that two private property owners have a dispute over who owns the property or who controls the property or what use, if there's a restriction at issue that governs what the private properties can, have to abide by and can enforce, it's up to those private properties owners to bring the dispute in a court of competent jurisdiction.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there a plan that shows the land in question? That shows the
three paper
roads? I assume there was one on the northern side that is a continuation of. But
I can probably give you a sense of what it is.
It'd be helpful to understand
There was a plan in here that I saw.
That showed it? Was it in Corac's letter?
No.
No.
Was it in the Board of Selectmen's letter?
Maybe not a drawing.
No, I remember seeing the named paper roads, Maynard Street, and I just don't know where it is. But I
can kind of explain it.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Well, why don't you if you could turn that to us in this regard so we can see it.
We can just make some notes.
So,
go ahead.
So the site today, we have Surfside Road along the front.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, and then there were actually paper streets throughout this area. And there was a paper street that runs, you can actually see the outline right along the top here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Runs right along the back, following the plane that's starting at Fairgrounds Road and continues in this direction for way past the
Yeah,
site.
that's McLean.
So
See it here, Lisa.
Oh, it is here?
Time out one. I don't mean to interrupt, but it's on conceptual plan page 3. Concept plan. You can see McLean, Cotton.
Concept plan.
So it should be on your.
Oh, I see. It's the reduction. Got it. Concept plan. Concept utility plan?
Okay.
So if you actually start here at the intersection of Fairgrounds and Surfside, you got this McLean, that ran all the way along the back. And then there was Cotton Street here. I forget the name of one. There was a street here, as well as a street here. So there was a process where they had been, they'd gone through town meeting to determine that they could be eligible for the paper street process. There was an A&R plan done with staff to split them all in half. That was done through the planning board. Then there was a taking by the selectmen, then ultimately an RFP where butters had the opportunity to bid on those. So for this specific property, the road along the back of Plain Street, both pieces of property were bid on and combined within this parcel. On the butters to the side, the butter on this side purchased half of the street, and then this property gained the other half. And then on this side of the property, both sides of the street were incorporated into this parcel. The butter on this side did not fit. So basically, they all came out, and there were both two sides on the back, both sides here, and then one of the sides got incorporated.
It's roughly 45 feet on the east side, 22 feet on the west side, and then the 45 or 50 feet on the back, on the north.
And to be clear, the neighbor, the yard sale program, as I understand it, the abutting properties are given the right to bid, if you will, but there's preference given to the abutter. In other words, it's not a dollar and cents thing, is it, ultimately? But anyway.
I think in general that's the concept.
Go ahead. Let Leslie and just identify yourself, please.
All right. Hi, I'm Leslie Snell, Deputy Director of Planning. So the yard sale program is a Board of Selectmen initiative, and when the paper streets are made available for the abutters, generally they're split in half, and the abutter on each side gets preference. So they have a set dollar amount. It's not a bidding war type situation.
Right. So in other words, the neighbors to this property on two of the sides opted not to buy the pieces of property, their half of the paper road.
I think
Correct?
Eleanor manages the RFPs. Just
some of them are done with request for proposal, so a higher bid comes in for anybody parcel.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure who purchased what here, but generally, if they're cut in half, the person who abuts that part of the road gets preference. If the person on the other side doesn't purchase it and is put out for RFP again, then they can buy it.
Okay.
But preference is always given to the direct abutter.
All right. Well, it's really a move. It's
yeah.
not
What I
necessary.
can say in this piece, as far as who bid on the RFPs. So on this property owner, the 104 Surfside bid and got the half that immediately butted in. The 106 Surfside bid on both sides. So with the immediate piece, 22-foot piece, obtained that. But because the 104 property owner had also bid, they had preference. So basically, they got the half on their side, the 106 got the half on its side. Nobody bid on either. 106 bid on both of these parcels. The property owner on the other side did not bid. And then the 108 side, 108 did not bid, so 106 had bid on both of them. So that was just kind of the way the process shook out.
Thank you.
I have what I think is a little bit of additional information. I don't think it's necessarily germane to the 40B proceeding, except to the extent that it plays into what restrictions may have been placed or may not have been placed. There's an RFP process, but sometimes there's also actual notice given to the abutters. I can't speak for all the abutters here, but I think I'm aware of the Boy Scouts who are on one side who didn't get actual notice. Some people get a call and say, this is available. Do you want to look into it? Do you want to bid on the RFP? Some don't. I don't think the Boy Scouts are ever aware of their opportunity, whereas other people may have been. And how they became aware is a question.
Okay. Well, that would be an interesting point of interest. So, Arthur, do you want to say something?
If I may, the point is that, for the record, this is Attorney Arthur Reed, one of the counsel for the applicant here. Without regard to the bidding process, the fact is that these parcels were taken by the town through the yard sale program that's been established and has been operating for some time. And the parcels in question were made available for purchase, and through that process, the applicant here acquired those parcels. And the present owner of the property, the trust, strictly speaking, of which Mr. McKinnon is now the trustee, acquired these parcels. They are part of our locus. They're required to be merged into the remaining part of the locus by the terms of the yard sale program, and they are available for this project. And again, the language about residential purposes does not, in fact, say anything about single family. That's a red herring. The fact is that this is a residential project. The parcels are owned by the applicant, and for all the other reasons why the site control issue should not be a question, it having been previously determined by the in connection with the early part of this project. The fact is that there should be no question, and I can provide whatever would be needed by way of certifications of title that the applicant does, in fact, own outright the property in question.
Do you own it at this point, or you have a P&S to buy it?
Yeah, I'm the trustee of the trust that owns the property.
So you've taken
correct. Okay. So the 106 Nantucket 106 Surfside Realty Trust is the trust that owns the property. I'm the trustee
of
that trust.
Parcel now.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And then separately, Surfside Commons LLC, which is the applicant. I'm actually the manager for Surfside Commons LLC, which is the applicant for the 40B.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, there seems, if there's a difference of opinion as to control, it does not sound like it's something that is necessarily in our jurisdiction, but something we should take into account.
Well, I'd be interested, maybe not today, but perhaps at the next meeting or next few meetings, listening to 10 minutes of each side.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many attorneys there are that would like to present, but I don't want to listen to it for the entire meeting. But I'd just like to hear a little bit more about what the issues are.
Well, and taking that one step further, Michael, instead of listening, because we can do that, we should get it in writing. If you have a case to make, put it in writing. We'll reconsider this particular issue at the next meeting, because I don't think we're going to resolve it right now. And, MHP thinks that there was enough of a control issue to issue the PEL. So, that's what I think we have to work out under those constraints right now. If it's proven to us to be different. My reading on it was the Nantucket Land Council seemed to be speaking primarily about the paper roads, not control of the overall. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why I wanted to understand the size of the paper roads and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it would potentially, if there was a smoking gun, I suppose it would potentially change the size, but not necessarily the intent. So.
Let me be clear, I agree with the developer and Mr. Reed. There's no question of ownership of the site. They own it. It's a question of whether a substantial portion of the site, I can't do the math from looking at these, but I don't know, it's a quarter, a third, something, it's a pretty big section of it, is restricted in some fashion. We're not allowed this development.
Okay, so let's be clear. You own it. We want to hear about if it's restricted. That's what you just said. So let's not get into all the other details and the red herrings and the subterfuge. Just, is it restricted in any way, shape, or form? Fair enough?
Yeah. What happens to this process if if one of the, as you were saying, private property owner and private property owner to dispute about if a lawsuit is brought by a private property owner against Nantucket 106 because of what's being proposed to be done, where does that put us?
That's a very good question, and that would be separate from this proceeding. There is a PEL that says that they have the ability, they're eligible to be here. Mm-hmm. And so no jurisdiction by this board to say denied because you don't have site control. What I'm saying is that this is not happening in a vacuum. If there were new information with regard to site control that the subsidizing agency had not heard, it would be well to send them a letter about it. But you would continue on with your process.
So we would continue. So even if there was a separate lawsuit going on between neighbors or whatever, we would proceed.
Anytime that a developer goes forward with a 40B or any other kind of application, they always go forward at risk of the potential that a nearby landowner may have a dispute over a boundary line. And I've seen 40Bs that have been approved, and then the private litigation between the private parties means that there's not the ability for the comprehensive permit holder to use part of the land for the comprehensive permit, and then they have to come back and do a modification. But that determination with respect to the rights and obligations of the various parties needs to come from a court of competent jurisdiction and not from this board.
I was just curious procedurally whether we would.
You would not stop. It would not stay. Certainly, it might be the case if there were a serious issue, which I think you've heard the developers say that they don't think it is a serious issue. But if there were one, there would be the ability by the applicant to say, we would like to agree to a stay, and then you could talk about that. But there would not be the right to stay the proceeding. Okay? And certainly we can go back and forth over the process if there are certain challenges, there is a procedure under the regulations that if you have a serious challenge, you can bring it forward to the subsidizing agency, and then there's a whole process that can be followed. But I'm not seeing that here in this situation, at least not yet.
Okay. So, does anybody else want to speak specifically on this issue? No. So, I see you. Oh, you want to speak up on this one? Not this. No, I didn't think so. So, as a board, we're okay with moving off of this issue until we'd like written thoughts. Mm-hmm. Hopefully not handed to us at the meeting, so we can actually see them ahead of time on the specific issue of any restricted uses or whatever one is purporting on the site. Yeah.
If there were a written opinion or any kind of written comment, please have it sent to me.
Yeah. Of course, everything should go through Eleanor. Okay.
Would it be helpful, like a week before the meeting?
Yeah, at least a week before the meeting, ideally, so that we have a chance to actually read it ahead of time. So on that issue, are we good to move off that one? Yeah? Yep. Okay. Go ahead, please. I know you would identify yourself.
Linda Williams, Chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, Chairman of HTC, Vice Chairman of the Housing Authority, and Vice Chairman of the Planning Board. Just as a point of fact, there were 2 other town entities that sent letters of concern to the state. The Housing Authority sent a letter of concern, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as well. We'll make sure that those letters are in your file.
I didn't get those.
I don't think we got them.
No, you have very little in the file.
I read a lot.
On process.
3 hours worth.
Yeah.
Wait, so those letters
I've been
were
through
sent-
4040Bs when I was the administrator of the ZBA, so this is old hat. But we'll make sure you will get those copies of the letters. On a process issue, what we've done in the past with some of the 40Bs is you've had a PowerPoint, because there are plenty of people sitting in this audience. Not everybody has the packet, the booklet.
Fair enough.
And it's very appropriate to have a PowerPoint, because you've got a screen that will come down from there, and the PowerPoint can be run off a computer. And you should have that at every meeting from now on, so the audience can see exactly what you're talking about. They can see a full rendering of the architectural features, the site plans, their pro formas, and everything else that they're going to be discussing as the plan gets fleshed out. I know at the HDC we're going to require a PowerPoint, and at the Planning Board we're going to require a PowerPoint. So I think one needs to be developed for all the boards that are going to be commenting on this, particularly this one where everybody's here. I know in the past, boards, at least the Planning Board has, and I know the ZBA in the past has, required a certain amount of money to be placed into a fund managed by the ZBA for peer review and anything else that the board has to spend money on. I haven't heard any discussion about that. I don't think it's been done yet. I checked, but a certain amount of money should be placed. Have they put that in? That's where you get your peer review. So it's that stuff is being assured will happen because you have money in the bank. And then if it runs out, they put more in. The Planning Board voted last week, I've lost track of my weeks, Monday, to make a comment here prior to our formal review. And if the Planning Board is going to make a formal review and the HDC is going to make a formal review, we want full hard copies for every single person sitting there. I don't want a CD. I don't want it online. We need hard copies so we can review it ahead of time on our own. But the Planning Board brought up significant concerns. We're not going to elaborate on them because we haven't reviewed it formally. Parking was an issue. The failed intersection at Surfside and Fairgrounds, because when we did Abrams Quarry, some of you were here, that was a concern because that intersection, even with the stop sign, four-way stop, was a failed intersection. All of the traffic is going to be feeding into that one intersection, so we were concerned about that. We were concerned about the density of the project, the infrastructure improvements, that includes the sewer, water, sewer districts, doesn't match the character of the neighborhood. We were concerned about traffic, We're concerned about impact on surrounding properties and the appropriateness of the site. We're requesting input from all the neighbors as well as obviously the proponents. That is what we have asked for. I assume we will hopefully get it. The public is allowed to come to the planning board and the HDC meetings to voice their concerns. And I think that's about it at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So PowerPoint sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, we agree. We
Okay.
can do PowerPoint.
So next meeting.
For the next zoning board hearing. Right.
Thank you.
And I'll add, actually, we brought hard copies for Eleanor.
I asked them to when they did.
They're right here with the
Okay.
plans we can turn on.
Thank you. So we can at least have some hard copies for some. Okay. So is there anybody else who wants to talk about sort of general issues? Please.
Mr. Chairman, Joseph Gay. I represent the immediate abutters to this project, the Davis family and the Farrell family. I just procedurally, and I've gotten accustomed over the years, Linda Williams somewhat stole a little bit of the thunder out of my presentation relative to letters that had been submitted in opposition to the state, mass housing on the project eligibility. I think it's really important that this board, and my clients and the community has every confidence in this board, in its oversight and determination in this project. But I think it's important this board familiarize yourself, if you have not already, with all of the letters that in fact were submitted to mass housing, not only the Board of Selectmen, the Land Council, housing authorities, agencies, but also the community, the neighbors, throughout Nantucket. That I believe there are many salient points that were brought to the attention of the Housing Authority and are applicable to this proceeding, separate from the site control issue. So I'd ask that all those letters be made part of the record, and that each of the board members familiarize himself with those letters. Specifically on this project, and the concern I have with respect to what was initially submitted by the applicant, this is a project of is 40B that the town has some familiarity with, Abrams Quarry and on Rugged Road, but those projects were separately standing structures. This is a project of first impression in many respects. Contrary to what the applicant had represented in the description of the project, saying Surfside Commons is comprised of 4 apartment buildings, 2.5 to 3.5 stories height with use of loft areas, efficient use of the buildings, and is typical of the neighborhoods on Nantucket. The massing of the building is in the range of other sustainable compact neighborhoods on the island. I'm not aware of any other type of project on this island that this project is typical of. It is a first impression for density, a first impression for massing, first impression for height and intensity at this site. And for that reason, I would strongly recommend that this board give careful scrutiny on any type of request for any waivers, and if anything, the applicant should be obligated to submit maybe an opinion letter on why any particular waiver would be appropriate for this type of project moving forward, as has been requested by the applicant to be approved. There are significant issues raised in the waiver requirement provisions that this applicant has simply said ask for a waiver of. And I think that burden should be placed on the applicant as to why that applicant feels it's appropriate to have a waiver from those requirements. I think it's appropriate for the applicant to incur and pay for studies for every aspect of this project going forward. So procedurally, I would ask this board, as I say, my clients would have confidence in this board on its oversight, but I'd ask this board to consider this project as unique and separate from prior 40B applications on the island. And for that reason, I think there should be appropriate pause taken at every step to either obtain opinions or studies and to, or even more than one study on specific issues such as traffic, wetland determinations, areas of those concerns on this particular site. And again, I trust this board will do that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of things. On the peer review issue, I believe some money has been put aside.
We have established an engineering escrow account 2 months ago. It will need to be replenished. Mr. McKinnon is aware of this.
And our consultant fees, again, are paid for by the developer?
Up to this point, we have had sufficient funds. We will need replenishment, and we have exchanged correspondence about this. He's fully aware. We'll need to replenish it with additional funds for other additional peer review that you may or may not make a motion to request this evening, today, such as the traffic study. That's going to cost potentially $6,000 to $8,000, depending.
Eleanor, quick question, maybe you know, or maybe Ed does. How long is a typical traffic study? Because I was looking at the notes, and I think they put it for August 13th, 15th, 2 days. It just doesn't seem like enough.
I would defer to Mike Burns, who I believe is in the audience, who could potentially, Mike, would you like to answer that question? Or the town's traffic?
Sorry, what was the question? It was the number of days that traffic is counted?
What's a typical traffic study, a thorough one? It just doesn't seem like 2 days. I guess it was the 13th and 15th. It just didn't seem sufficient, but maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sampling that's gathered, and the intent of that data collection was to be captured at the peak period. So, I mean, at least the time of year was appropriate on getting a sampling of the intersection turning movements. Any type of additional critique of the data that was collected, that's typically done as part of the peer review process. The days and the times. But I had some consultation with the traffic engineer prior to doing the counts to verify that the dates and times that they were conducting the counts would be acceptable. We just haven't critiqued the report as thoroughly as we'd like to do, and that will be done during the peer review process.
Okay, thank you. And you okay with that for now?
Yeah.
So in terms of this peer review issue, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. McKinnon, you are okay with paying for there's no objection to?
Yeah. No. We understand that's why we set up the account with Eleanor to start with, and we're interested to just get an understanding of what, and we're hearing it today, what else, and, just trying to get a sense of what the cost for those items will be, and then I'm sure we can coordinate on that with Eleanor.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, for the audience, it is very typical that, if not always, in my experience, that the developer pays for our peer reviewers. So if there's an issue, we'll hash it out here. And we haven't gotten to that list yet. We will, hopefully. So anybody else in the audience want to talk generalities or specifics? But no?
Can
Okay.
I say one thing about the letters?
Absolutely.
So Linda mentioned some letters that didn't make it into our packet. Anything that's sent,
They were not submitted to me.
right? That's what I'm saying. Like if something is sent to one of the PAC or whoever, if you CC Eleanor and we'll get a copy of it, and the same for emails or the neighbors sending information to either the Board of Selectmen or whatever. We have a lot of letters and emails that we received in our packet, but make sure to CC Eleanor or either hard copy or on the email so that she can get it to us so that we have the opportunity to read whatever you're trying to convey so that we have all the information.
And again, everything should go through Eleanor.
Yeah.
No phone calls to us or emails directly. Everything should go through Eleanor so it can get to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's directed at the Board of Selectmen, if you CC her, then we also get it as well, or the planning board or whatever. It keeps everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, some of the letters from the abutters were addressed to me as the chairman,
Right.
but they went through Eleanor. And
Right.
that's
I just
the
want to make sure
proper
everyone
channel.
out there knows
Yeah.
that we got whatever was emailed, that we did receive a lot of them, but apparently there are 2 letters that we
Yeah,
did
we
not
did.
get.
Yeah. We did not get those, yes. Okay. So whoever wrote those letters, Linda, you'll get them to Eleanor, and we'll see them. So the PowerPoint, we talked about the process. There is a little bit of a chicken and egg thing going on in terms of traffic study, this, that, and the other thing, because if the density issue is, if the density were to change, for instance, some of the data points and the paper roads and this, that, and the other thing may or may not be important at the end of it. The traffic study, by the way, is going to be done no matter what. So unless it's reduced to,
So
single
it would just
family.
become a better situation if the density is reduced.
Right.
I
So-
think a traffic study too, because I don't think that this is really a development that's going to be, I mean, I know that the summer is very busy, but I think that this is a year-round development, so.
That's a good point.
The traffic being done in August, to me, when the school's not in session, when there's things that aren't going on, that are kind of a year-round issue here, particularly on that street and in that area, the study needs to be done at a different time.
Which was my point. It
Yeah.
just seemed
That's a
like
good
2
point.
days out of the summer wasn't really
Yeah,
sufficient.
because it's only busy in the summer, like when the camps get out at 4
Right.
o'clock, and there are only very specific times that intersection gets or that road gets very busy in the summer. But I think during the year, it's busy a lot more frequently.
That's a good point.
And if I could add a comment?
Please.
And that's exactly why you have a professional traffic engineer do the peer review. There is a fairly prescribed process for preparing a traffic impact analysis study. And your peer reviewer, Tetra Tech, I believe, will review the traffic study and make sure it complies with the accepted professional methodology. They will review when the traffic counts were done. They will make a determination of whether or not that's adequate. If it's not adequate, they will make recommendations to that effect. But again, the beauty of proceeding with a traffic study is that it's unlikely that the density would ever increase.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
And therefore, it's a good peer review to get done sooner rather than later. Consistent with what we had discussed before, traffic is a concern to many. Let's get professional opinion and see if there really is an issue, and also if there is an issue, what the mitigation might be for that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a given. There's going to be a traffic study peer review. So, we good with that?
Mm-hmm.
And your point?
Yep.
Thanks. Okay, so another sort of big one seemed to be the sewer, and whether or not we have the right to grant whatever waiver is necessary with regard to the sewer. And I guess my question on that well, there's a lot of questions, but one of the questions is, if we were to determine or decide that we couldn't grant the waiver without going to town meeting, would that be a reason to stay, stop, or cease? So we're going to hear.
In my opinion, no, it would not. Instead, what it would mean is that if you found that every other requirement had been satisfied, then you would have the ability to grant the relief with the condition that they get the relief that you believe is necessary. And certainly this is a critical issue, and I know that sitting behind me, Attorney Schwartz is still not holding his breath in terms of convincing me. So what I would recommend is that perhaps the two of us, each of us, prepare written opinions and submit them to the board so that the board has the view of both the applicant and of town council. And with the board's permission, because certainly you have a deliberative process exemption that you could invoke, I would certainly recommend, though, that my opinion be provided to the public and to the applicant, and that there be a full and transparent exchange on the issues, and then it's all on the record, and I think that serves everyone very well. But that's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody out in the audience who wants to speak specifically about the sewer issue? No? Okay, so are we good with, this would be another sort of important point that we want to get a written opinion as to whether or not we have jurisdiction, whether we can give the waiver, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And from a timing standpoint, typically there's roughly a month in between meetings. Is that enough time? Yeah. Mr. Schwartz?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so that was the sewer. The water, there was some question. The only question I saw was whether or not, not whether or not there was the right to tie into the water, but whether or not it was in the pro forma as an expense. I mean, I think the developer has to anticipate that you're going to pay, that you would be paying for the extension of the water. Maybe not, but. Was that a question?
Sure.
Not really.
Yeah, I was trying to read your body language.
Yeah, that was a question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, both on the water and the sewer, the physical cost of installing the pipes and the infrastructure that's shown on here is included,
Okay.
and we did include some level of connection fees, but we are seeking a waiver for portions of those fees that we
Okay.
can get into the details of that. But the physical cost of installing the lines is in the pro forma.
Okay, thank you. Well, do we want to get to the big question, density, as board members, or? I mean, I think the density issue has a large impact on some of the other issues out there, i.e. design. There's no point in nitpicking the design if it's smaller or larger. I mean, again, parking is related. Right now, I don't think there's enough parking spaces to meet the zoning bylaw, if you will, for the number of units. And from both a zoning standpoint and a practical issue, the lack of parking is probably would be a problem. But again, that relates to density in large measure, and the same with the site plan. I mean, I have a bunch of questions on the site plan, but it all, or not all, but many of them have to do with density. So.
Yeah, I mean, density wouldn't be inclusive of the setbacks of Surfside Road and
Yeah,
all that.
everything. I mean, I'm not sure it really affects something like stormwater drainage, but we would definitely get peer review on that type of thing. There was talk by one of the audience members about peer review on design issues, architectural issues. Again, it sort of has to do with density. If the building isn't if it's the same size, then we go from there. If it's smaller or different, we would be going from there. So.
Can I ask one question about the parking? Just out of somebody mentioned 92 spaces. Was that inclusive of the 8 tandem interior spaces, or is it 100?
I think it's 100.
It's 100. 92 exterior, 8 interior.
I think so. Okay. Yeah, 8 cars inside, 4 garages.
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
100 total.
100 total, but the tandem ones. Whatever. It is what it is. It says drawn. But so I guess, where do we want to go? What's our initial thought on density? Does anybody in the audience want to talk about density? Feel free. Yeah. We're going to do it sooner rather than later.
This is the time to speak up.
So who wants to talk? Anybody? No. Okay. Guess it's on us.
It's on us. I have concerns with the density.
Yeah, I think the initial blush is that
There's a lot of concern with the density and the scale of the buildings. I am, for people that don't know, Sorry. I am an architect here in Nantucket. I'm in front of the HTC a lot. This is totally incongruous with any scale of any sort of building that we would ever see come in front of the board. So many of the roof pitches are inappropriate, and I don't want to get into their jurisdiction because that's not why we're here, but it does seem like the architecture, at least in the initial concept, is completely out of character with the architecture of Nantucket. I mean, it's got shingled walls and pitched roofs, but that's about it. And double hung windows that are 6/6. Other than that, the scale of the buildings is completely inappropriate.
Are you referring to the height as well?
The height, the roof pitches, the number of floors. I was looking at the grading plan that shows that the back section on the two back buildings, the 15-unit buildings. I mean, if you look at the height of that building on the back, it's 55 feet tall. I mean, I don't know where you would ever you wouldn't find a building that height in Nantucket. So I have a lot of concerns about the scale of the buildings, and I guess therefore the density, because that's why the buildings are so large. I also noticed that a lot of the site plans that are considered or floor plans that are considered 2-bedroom units are really they're the same as the 3-bedroom unit. You've just taken a den and a bedroom and called it a den instead of a bedroom. So I think the density in terms of how these units are used might be quite different than how they're portrayed as 2 bedrooms. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if we can have any control over that.
Sure.
A 2-bedroom unit really only can have a certain number of people in it. You can't rent your den out as a 3rd bedroom because they're basically the same size unit.
Yeah. I have the same basic concerns. One of my further concerns is on it appears that the site has been manipulated to some degree. It was described to me as very flat. I looked at the grading plan, I think, properly, and it looks to be all roughly 28 feet. There's a little hump on it, but in the new site slopes up to, I believe, 34 feet, and then is cut down to 25 in order to get those back basement level apartments in, which that doesn't seem quite right to me. I mean, it for no other reason. We had to look at how that affects drainage. Again, I think in that particular regard, I would like to see some site sections. Now, again, it may or may not be appropriate right now if we're talking about the overall density. But site sections that show really what's happening. Here it was at 28 feet,
right? And
now we're building this up 6 feet to 34 feet, and we're cutting the other side to 25 feet for a net 9. Did I do the math right? Yeah, 9-foot difference. I mean that's pretty radical, right? And that's primarily on the 2 back buildings, the 15-unit buildings. But again, that all relates to density because not that issue doesn't relate to density. There is some manipulation of the site that needs to be clearer and a clearer reasoning for it because the smaller buildings are going to be on land that is built up to 6, in some areas 6 feet. So from the net, I don't know what those buildings.
You mean the ones the back ones, the 15-unit buildings?
No, these
These look like the grade is going from 27 to probably 30. So that's
right.
A couple
So it's.
feet. But then the back,
But I mean, everything is good. The buildings are already tall, and to mound the dirt up and then put in the I don't think that's going to fly. Let's put it that way. I think we're going to need to look at that a lot more closely. And again, that relates to density. So the 10 feet off, I think Lisa may have alluded to this, the 10 feet off the front yard setback, and the buildings are, again, very large. It just doesn't seem to have a great sensitivity to the neighborhood, and I'm not saying it has to be a single-family dwelling, but doesn't seem to have much sensitivity to the neighborhood or to Nantucket in general, where, for better or worse, design aesthetics are at the forefront of every project. I mean, you have to go to the HTC. The island in and of itself is, a pretty homogeneous, again, better or worse, design aesthetic throughout, and this doesn't seem to give any sensitivity to that issue. So I think the uniqueness of Nantucket, not, that Nantucket's that unique, I'm primarily on the design standpoint, I think needs to be addressed a little bit more
I think
carefully.
Nantucket has spent a lot of time, unlike a lot of other places, obviously on the Cape and the Vineyard, and we've been very careful and maybe sometimes to a fault in terms of the amount of regulation that happens here. But I think that's what's kept it unique, and I feel like the scale of this development or the density of this development feels like it belongs on 132 on the Cape and not on Surfside Road. And maybe there might be I just think Surfside Road is these are 2-acre lots that were single-family homes. To have something that is this dramatic or so different than what the aesthetic is or the scale is that we're used to out there is a little hard to take or swallow. So I'd like to see some discussion about how this development can become an enhancement to the area in some way, as opposed to something that looks like it dropped in from outer space.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to chime in?
I'd be curious as to, I think if I'm clear, the applicant has decided not to go before the HDC.
Has asked not to.
Well, they've asked for a waiver.
Yeah, waiver. Yeah. And I can't remember any other 40B on the island that didn't end up at the HDC or seek out their advice. Mm-hmm. And we're probably not going to discuss that completely today, but that would be my advice, to seek some suggestions from them, and knowing that in advance that you're not required to go before them.
Well, we can not give the waiver. I think in the past we have asked applicants to work with the HDC.
That's correct.
I think maybe Abrams Quarry went to the HDC, but I'm not sure Sachem's
Path did go.
An advisory role.
We asked them.
Rugged Scott waived it and came to us, I believe, and Sachem's you waived it. So Sachem's came and asked our advice.
Right.
We gave you an opinion on the original. Once the 40B was done, they're all coming into the HDC as regular applicants now.
Yeah.
But during the Sachem's Path process, we gave you the advice, what color trim, things like that should be, and gave it to you because you are the authority, the final authority. So what you're doing in this case, if you don't grant the waiver to them, they're going to have to come to us as regular applicants. If you grant the waiver to them, like I believe Abrams Quarry was granted the waiver, again, we rendered an opinion and you took it to heart. You didn't really overstep what we gave you a recommendation. From what I'm gathering from what they're asking for, you're going to be asking the HDC to review the project and give you a recommendation. They're asking for the waiver, not to be forced to come to the HDC as a regular applicant. So I think it's probably going to, a majority of the 40Bs, you grant the waiver, get the opinion from us, instead of not granting them the waiver and forcing them to come to the HDC. That's what's been the norm, except for one 40B.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to be clear on the legal nature of this, and taking under advisement your suggestion, which we will take under advisement. This is what I was referencing earlier in terms of the scope of our waiver request. We were over-inclusive. But from a legal point of view, we're absolutely not required to go before any local board. We don't need a waiver for that. That's inherent in the 40B process. So with due respect, we don't, it's not within the jurisdiction of this board to decide whether or not we need to go before the HDC in any capacity. We can choose to take your suggestion, but we don't need a waiver from the board, and I think that's quite clear.
Even though it was in your list of waivers.
To the extent that that is meaningful, we put it in a list of waivers, but we'll withdraw that as a waiver request if that's important to the board. But it's not legally required.
Well, just jumping ahead for a moment, for the next meeting, why don't you get a waiver list that's real?
Well, what we typically do is what we'd like to do as the process proceeds. We're happy to do whatever you feel is right. What we typically do as the process proceeds, sit down with local counsel or your engineering consultants if there's waivers that relate to other issues that touch on the design of the project, and then we refine it. But if you prefer us to do it now, we can do that as well.
I only prefer it because you say you don't need the HDC, which is fine. It may or may not be the case. You also asked for a waiver of the building permit.
I don't believe that's the case. I saw that in the notes of the meeting, but I'm not sure where that waiver request is.
I thought I read it, but maybe I misread it. I mean, I'm just saying maybe the waiver list was a
We're not entitled to a waiver of a building permit, so I don't. If we did, then that's a mistake.
But you were entitled to a waiver of Concom regulations, is that right?
We are requesting a waiver of the local bylaw requirements, but not insofar as the state is concerned. I don't think that wetlands are a significant issue on this site in any
Maybe
event.
not. I was just curious. I saw that on the list again. So.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, to be clear, the one that we did
Wait a minute, time out.
was voluntary. The one they came to us voluntarily gave up the right to come here.
Okay. Anyway,
should we ask Ed to familiarize the audience with why it might be in their best interest to ask for waivers on everything? Just so everyone knows that it might be wise counsel to ask for 100% waivers in your application, just so everyone is aware why they're asking for all these waivers, if they are. I mean,
sure. Ed, you want to? I mean,
was it in their application?
The reason you tend to be conservative as an applicant is so that if the project is approved and you go to build the project, the building inspector is comfortable with the project proceeding. There'll be a condition or requirement in the comprehensive permit, if it is approved, that says applicant must comply with all local rules except those specifically waived in this decision. So if you're on the borderline, you just tend to be conservative and put it in there. And that's why applicants do that. But in terms of this discussion of waivers, it's premature. Waivers evolve through the hearing. Very often the applicant will withdraw certain waiver requests or be reminded that a certain waiver request hadn't been listed.
okay.
Then if this project is approved, the building inspector reviews two things: the compliance of the project with the building code and the compliance of the project with the terms of the comprehensive permit. I just want to clarify one thing because I'm not sure everybody understands. The reason it's called a comprehensive permit is that the ZBA assumes the role of all local boards. And therefore, as Steve Schwartz said, the ZBA cannot compel the applicant to appear before board. So you couldn't say you have to go to the HDC. However, the HDC rules are local rules, and therefore they would need to request waivers from the HDC requirements. I'm not sure everybody understood that. And for example, the applicant is not required to appear before the planning board. It's the planning board's responsibility to review the plans and submit comments to the ZBA. That's the responsibility of all local boards on a 40B. And that's why copies, and that's why Eleanor requested additional copies so that all boards would have the information so that they could make informed comments on the application. But again, waivers are very likely to be discussed in the middle or end of the process. What you really want to focus on now, and I sound like a broken record, are what the issues that are perceived to be, they may not be, but perceived to be critical issues. And design, you've begun to discuss the design. Clearly, I think that's a very important issue. So I think the board's done a great job in this initial hearing of sort of stating what their particular concerns are. Okay. And that, unfortunately, doesn't always happen with 40B.
Okay.
People wait until the middle or the end of the process. That's not fair for anybody. So again, I'd recommend that you ask, are there any more issues that the board or members of the public are particularly concerned about? And then I assume that you're going to think about what the agenda should be for the next meeting.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just to go back over the original question, which is, how does this process work? There are two issues here, and I think they're being conflated a little bit. One is what permits are necessary for this project, and the other is what waivers have been requested. It is frequently the case that developers will ask for waivers of various permits that they need, and I think that oftentimes what they really mean is that they want this board to issue the permits, to sit as the HDC, to give the COA, to make that analysis, as opposed to do an outright waiver to say, well, you don't even need to go through that process. Certainly, I absolutely concur with Attorney Schwartz that you do not have the jurisdiction under 40B to compel them to go to the HDC. You certainly have the right to ask them, to suggest to them that it would be worthwhile, as you have, for them to go to the HDC and have an offline from this proceeding discussion, and then come back and perhaps have a memo from the HDC and from the developer to say, well, we've revised our design after speaking with the HDC. Or you could invite the HDC and have a joint public hearing session with them to go over these issues and get their advice and counsel as you go forward. But in the final analysis, there are two questions. One, is there a waiver request? And the waiver request would mean no COA. You would do away with it completely. And then that does not mean that they're going to, if you denied it, you would have to go further to say, well, you either need to go to the HDC or you need to deal with this board in order to get the COA. So you want to be careful not to conflate those two things. And I think what Attorney Schwartz has said is that he's considering now discussing it, going back with his client, with the developer, to see if they will withdraw the waiver and instead come to you and either ask for the COA and give you the information that you need in order to go through that process, and perhaps they will even consider going offline to the HDC. I don't think they've actually outright said no, only that Attorney Schwartz has correctly said that you can't compel them.
Got it.
So I mostly agree with that, but let me let me just be specific about the way I understand the rules are supposed to work. If there's a requirement in town that you need to appear before a separate local board and get approval for a project, that is within your board. That's the nature of a comprehensive permit, as Ed said. That's what it's all about. If there are specific performance requirements, standards that are in a local bylaw, we need to ask for, that we're not complying with, whether it's a local wetlands bylaw or planning board regulations, if this were a subdivision, or the HDC has specific requirements, then we either need to comply with those or request a waiver from this board. If the HDC does not have performance standards or requirements, but just has a general requirement, you need to come before us and get approval, we're not subject to that process or any requirement for a waiver. We don't need one. So to the extent that we caused confusion by putting that down, and that's causing some consternation, we can clarify. We'll take that away. That does not mean that we're agreeing to get the certificate of appropriateness from the HDC or that we need a certificate of appropriateness from the HDC. That means we're not, we will take what you said under advisement and consider whether or not we want to consult with them, but we're not subject to their review.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
I think maybe we agree more than I thought. In the event that the jurisdiction of the HDC is invoked here to issue or not a certificate of appropriateness, then, in my opinion, that COA process would happen here, and you would give or not give or give with conditions a certificate of appropriateness. And, of course, the developer could, looking at the standards that are required within the HDC's regulations or local bylaw, it could seek waivers from specific criteria that are set forth in those regulations. So, again, I just want to be careful that we're not conflating the need for the permit with the wholesale request for a waiver of the whole process versus individual waivers within the request for the permit.
Okay, I think we get it, and I think we got a little off the subject because it all boils down to the density within reason. So, or a lot of these things are impacted by the density, the size of the buildings, and the design, and all of that has to do with the number of apartments in it. Mm-hmm. So, and as does the site manipulation. So, for lack of a better word. So, I guess we can either keep discussing it, come up with some numbers, or ask the developer to voluntarily just give up some units.
Yeah, I'm not ready at this meeting to put a number on what I think is appropriate for units, but I think as things evolve, it will happen. And whether that takes 2 or 3 meetings, I'm not sure. But I agree that the density is the issue.
So I guess the question to Mr. McKinnon is, are you ready, willing, and able to take a look at the density issue as it impacts every one of these other issues?
Let me offer a few comments. One item that was actually in our Pell application, which was not specifically included in the comprehensive permit, was actually a bit of a density analysis. It was an exhibit to the Pell application. I know it's on the information that's online related to our 40B, and I know Eleanor has our Pell. I don't know the best way to distribute it to them. I think it was Exhibit E, Exhibit F, one of those. What we did there was actually looked at neighborhoods within Nantucket that had a certain amount of square footage per acre that we could actually compare to this site. So we had, I forget the number, it was 6 or 8 different neighborhoods. We identified them. They're mostly in downtown, or in town, as well as there was one in Sconset. They all had densities in excess of 30,000 square feet per acre. We're actually less than that. So there was a bit of a density analysis to some parallels in Nantucket. Obviously, we know those densities do not exist in the Surfside Road area, but they were on island. So I think it's worth taking a look at that. At the same time, we know that all the town boards are looking at this now, and we know there's a lot of comments coming in. I think what we'd like to do is take a look at all those comments, kind of put them all into context from our standpoint, sit down with our team, and then try to, make some decisions based on that. So, at this point, we've started, with the classic 40B proposal. It's still fairly preliminary. Obviously, we appreciate all the comments from your board. Having gone through the coordinated review, we got initial comments from, DPW, from, fire, police, and some of the other groups. We know there are actually written comments coming in to you from those various groups. Would love to have the benefit of those so that we can take everything in context before we then start to kind of take the next step.
Okay. Fair enough.
Again, this is very preliminary, and there's a lot of work to be done before we can start to talk about real impacts of density on neighborhood and on the island. There's a lot of work to be done on design and appropriateness and stormwater and traffic. But I will say this. As I alluded to before, we've just spent a lot of money trying to protect 100 acres next door and are hoping to acquire, in conjunction with the land bank, either the fee or conservation restriction or both, over 100 acres next door. Town forest is nearby. This is a very rural area of the island, which, as some other people have said, has already been impacted by several 40Bs. It's 2-acre zoning immediately around it and then a lot of open space. I don't live on the island. I've spent a lot of time here over these many years. I don't know of another residential structure in the island that's 55 feet tall.
There's no other building.
Well, there may be. I mean, there may be, maybe downtown there's a hotel or, I don't know, but it's 55 feet tall. I'm not aware of a building on the island, a residential structure that's 35 or 37 feet tall. It's very unusual. Now, we know it's a 40B, and 40Bs are designed to be at higher density in surrounding areas, otherwise you wouldn't need them. But this is extraordinary for this area, and I'm sure it's something will be explored at length in these proceedings.
Thank you. I think we did get that density study because I remember reading it. I don't remember the exact numbers. Another way to look at density is typically, again, there's many, many ways to look at it. The densest zoning area out here is 5,000 square feet. If you had roughly 108,000 square feet, is that the size of your property, roughly?
24 units?
Well, assuming you get 2 units per 5,000 square feet, but you'd also have some roadway to get the subdivision in there. There's all sorts of ways. I mean, you come up with probably about 32, 34, depending. It's just a little too heavy-handed, in my opinion. So, hopefully, even before the comments from other boards and whatnot come in, we can begin to consider some reduction.
I think also just the setback to Surfside Road, which is a big issue. I mean, there's even with your 3D here. I mean, there's like with 10 feet or 15 feet, there's no room for any kind of screening to the bike path. So this is having this immense impact on that roadway and the visual character of the road. If there was more of a setback and maybe there was just a small entrance and a little bit more. A lot more vegetation that actually created a vegetated buffer to Surfside Road.
Right, instead of showcasing the buildings.
Yeah, I don't think it, no offense to the buildings, but I'm not sure anybody really wants to see them all the time. They would prefer to have it be more hidden and sort of a surprise.
And that's sort of typical of the homes along that road.
Right. Well, and even that was an important part of, Satan's Path, is they did have that buffer along Surfside Road. I mean, it's low, but...
Yeah, I don't think you're going to buffer too much of this, but I agree with you.
I
agree with you 100%.
But better than just having lawn right up to the bike path.
Well, the bike paths, I think, to the new bike path that they may put in. Yeah, good.
Well, I mean, however this is depicted, it seems like it's going to be right there. So.
Yeah.
So I think that, and I think it just, architecturally incorporating more single-story mass will make a huge difference in the architecture of the buildings. Yep. They're just too tall, too vertical. There's nothing that's single-story on any of these buildings. And I think that's a...
Yeah, and then, again, without beating the dead horse, that building up the land to chop it, to cut it down, to get the basement units in, I mean, I'm going to have a hard time with that one. So there are some issues in there.
Mr. Chairman, may I give my 2 cents on a couple of things?
Can you wait 1 minute?
I'm sorry, I thought you were done. My apologies.
I'm done. Go ahead. No, it wasn't, but go ahead.
My name is Linda Davis. My husband Brian and I are the immediate abutters at 108 Surfside Road. And I just want to tell you that Mr. McKinnon came to our home in August and came to meet us to tell us what was going on next door. And our lives have been turned upside down since then. We have, as neighbors and abutters, we've all gotten together on numerous occasions. And I would do a head count and say there's 25 of us here today. And we've got a good, solid group of neighbors that are in total opposition to this project. And as Attorney Gay said, we are relying upon you for your assistance with this. some of the things that really have me personally upset with regard to this matter is the disregard of the developer for the uniqueness, as we said, of Nantucket, the disregard for the Surfside plan, the disregard for the master plan, the disregard for the Wellhead Recharge District, the disregard for the Historic District Commission. He is stating that he's here to help with the housing on the island, but his project is with total disregard to the community of Nantucket. There is no other development like this on the island, nor should there be. And I believe before you, this project is going to set a precedent that, I'm sorry, you have to set for the future of this island. Is there a need for housing? I am not going to disagree with that matter at all. I am going to disagree with this type of housing project that is being presented to the community. As an abutter, as a community member, wherever we go, we are approached by it, and I have not heard one person support this project. I urge you, please, just to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just sort of a more picayune question, and it's one of the buildings show, or two of the buildings show basement storage. Are those? Is it only one building? Oh, okay. Is that? It looks like there's a large freight elevator. Is that? Are those for the units, or is it your intention to rent those?
No, it would be for the unit. I can just show you where it is.
No, I know where it is. We'll show the audience. Sorry. Please. That is a one-story mass. It's the one.
So it's this,
in the
this
back?
building right
Oh.
here.
Yeah.
And then off the back of it here. Basically a stairway and an elevator, but to meet the handicap code, because it's would be accessible for the residents, you actually need to have the elevator, plus the transport products up and down. But it would basically be just the basement of that, because it would be storage units for the residents of the community.
Okay, because I believe it's in your pro forma as an income source.
Right, you would pay rent for those.
So you would get a chance as a resident to potentially get one of those units. Okay. Another design issue that we should get out on the table is how we feel about the clubhouse and the pool and this, that, and the other thing. So, I mean, we don't have to discuss it at length, but I'm just identifying it as a potential point of discussion. So we have someone else in the audience, please.
Deborah Timmerman again. I was coming up to speak about the health club. This is not an RC zone, and I don't think that a health club is appropriate at all in the area. It's a business. It's puts a whole different beat to the whole property. I mean, there's going to be congestion and noise, et cetera, from this, and it's a residential area. The density is beyond ridiculous, and it's just we're going to send you all white light.
Was it meant to be a health club open to people beyond this development?
No, this is intended strictly for the residents and their guests.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yeah, so it'd be a clubhouse with a pool, area around the pool, but it's strictly for the residents and the guests. And they may have a guest over, but it's not something that would encourage outside people or charge fees or anything like that.
And the clubhouse is what's planned to be inside there, just open space? No, I see
Yeah.
it. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no gym.
Yeah, there's a plan on
it's
it.
not
Yeah,
a health club, it's
correct.
a
No, there's a
house
couple of
for that.
bathrooms and a gathering area for the residents. Yeah, the other element that we have proposed, which I probably should have explained right up front, and it was in the pro forma. Out of the 56 units, 14 would be affordable. One of the market rate units has been reserved for a full-time live-in manager. We actually think it's a pretty important element of this proposal to have the manager or the manager's family live on site, so that essentially someone's there, all hours of the day. If there's any kind of an issue or problem, they're on site to manage it. And that's why one of the units does not show rent. That'd be provided as part of their compensation, as well as the salary on top of that.
Yeah, I saw that somewhere. I didn't figure it on the
Are
pro
you gonna,
forma.
are you gonna have mail delivery on the site, or are these people?
Yes, there's a mail delivery, I believe it's proposed right in that location there.
What, I'm looking at.
We're looking at the site plan.
Yeah.
One comment back to the clubhouse,
thing
since we were
right here?
talking about
I
it.
guess so.
Again, the scale of it just seems somewhat inappropriate. It looks like the main mass is 2 stories, or 2.5 stories. And again, maybe there could be slightly more sensitivity to what goes on there.
Okay.
Because there's no
Yeah.
second floor, correct? There's
No,
second floor
it's
space.
that was the proposal to as shown, but no, obviously we're encouraged to hear a variety of comments, and we see this as part of the process.
Okay. We have a new audience member.
Not really a new audience, but I'm Doug Bryans. I'm very intimately concerned about this project. I own the property at 105 Surfside Road. Pardon me?
He's saying.
I just did. 105 Surfside. Everybody get that?
Yes.
We did, thank you.
Okay. This, to me, is a politically correct, feel-good project that's in vogue now. We want to feel we're doing the right thing for the poor people. I wonder, basically, who this is benefiting. In the bottom line, I don't feel that it's benefiting Nantucket. I don't feel it's benefiting Surfside. We're benefiting somebody, financially and otherwise, at the expense of Nantucket and at the expense of Surfside and at the expense of my property particularly. When I bought this 20 years ago, it was all 2-acre zoning. Not in my wildest dream did I ever feel it was going to be a project across the street. I think I would like to ask the board to really deeply think about, is this good for the environment? Is it good for the area? And who is it going to benefit? And with that, I will sit down. I did not prepare any statements, but I couldn't help but feel this. I do get the feeling, as I stand here and as I sat here for a couple hours, that it's somewhat accepted this is going to happen. When we start talking about the details of clearing up, say, an elevator or a rec room or something of that sort, it looks to me like it's foregone it's going to go through. It looks to me like some people have their mind made up that we can't be stopped. And think about it, please. I ask you all to do that. Thank you.
We will, and I guess I would like somebody at this point, whether it's Ed Marchant or Town Council, to sort of explain the 40B process and what we're doing up here. Nothing is a foregone conclusion. No one has made up their mind. At least I speak for myself. I hope the other board members haven't made up their mind on anything, because we just started. But there are certain limitations, constraints, or consequences to certain actions. So who wants to take that one? Ed, Alana?
I'm happy to.
Alana will start. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, what the board has before it is a comprehensive permit application under 40B, and the 40B statute provides that in the event that there is not a safe harbor available to the town, and obviously identified for the town and for staff all of the safe harbors that potentially could be available, and they've looked at them, and you've not received a memo from them indicating that any one of them is available. And in the event that that's the case, you have no particular safe harbor, don't have 10%, don't have any of the triggers that would allow you to say no or say yes with conditions and have them be held automatically as local concerns, that means that you're faced with an application that you are required under the statute to look at and to evaluate and to determine whether there are any local concerns that are raised by the application that outweigh the regional need for affordable housing in the event that after you've identified those local concerns and had a going back and forth with the developer and asked for conditions, and if the developer doesn't say yes to your conditions and the developer says, well, those conditions that you're imposing will render my project uneconomic, and then you bring Ed Marchant in to review to do a peer review of a pro forma. And in the event that Mr. Marchant comes back and says, well, I've reviewed their pro forma, they claim that the conditions that you're asking for would render the project uneconomic, it is true, then in order for you to impose conditions, you need to show that the local concern at the bottom of why you're asking for the condition, that it outweighs the regional need for affordable housing and that there isn't some mitigation that's reasonable that you can impose that would take care of the concern that you have. So those are the, as Attorney Schwartz said at the beginning, the PEL is a ticket, as he said, to a dance, and now this is the dance. And part of the dance is to go just as you've done through the process, open it up, begin to identify what those local concerns might be. Once you identify what the local concerns are, then you determine what conditions you may wish to impose or mitigation that you think is appropriate. The developer then has the opportunity to come back after the peer review is done to say, well, the concerns that you're raising and the conditions that you want to impose, I can go along with these 4, but not these 6, and these 6, will render the project uneconomic. Then you have the ability under the rules to say, well, give us a pro forma that shows and establishes that that's true, that it would render your project uneconomic. And again, it would go to the peer review consultant, Ed Marchant, and if he confirmed, well, yes, they're correct, it would render their project uneconomic, then you are back to needing to establish a burden of proof on your side that there is a local concern that warrants that condition that you're looking for that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing. So I understand that that's a complicated formula, which is, of course, why you have Ed Marchant on the line and why you have me here and why pretty much everyone who is interested in this matter is represented by counsel. So it's a technical, very technical procedure that you need to go through, and it needs to be gone through carefully. And I think that you're doing exactly the right thing to talk about the individual details, the height, the setbacks, the amount of parking, all of that. Then ultimately will get you to the overall question of the density and the massing. But it is very important that you look at the details.
Is it reasonable to, Ed, do you want to say something?
If I could add just a couple of things.
Please.
And I couldn't hear everything. The fact of the matter is that at the current time, the percentage of qualified affordable units in Nantucket is less than 3%. That is relatively low among the 351 communities in the Commonwealth. It doesn't put you in a particularly strong position. That may change with the other proposed developments, but for now, for this case, you're at less than 3%. The financial review for 40B projects is now done near the end of the process. The technical measure of economics, and again, this is going to appear to be technical, is that if a condition required by the board causes the return of the project to be less than the 10-year treasury rate plus 450 basis points, that would be considered to make the project uneconomic. So when a financial, or if a financial review is done, that would be the purpose of the analysis, to see whether or not the conditions required by the board would cause the project's return to drop below that number or below the current, the return that was included or resulted from the pro forma public hearing is
Okay.
for. It's to get all these opinions. It's for the board to make an informed decision. And they have three choices. They can deny the project, they can approve the project as submitted, or, which is usually the case, projects are approved with conditions. If you deny the project, your town council will comment or has commented that it puts you in a more difficult position when the applicant appeals that decision to the Housing Appeals Committee.
Right.
The project's never approved as submitted. And then the question becomes whether or not an approval, whether the conditions required in the approval are acceptable to the developer. Once the project goes to the HAC, it's fair to say you lose a lot of control. It's a de novo hearing, which means it begins anew. And any concessions or any mitigation measures that were negotiated with the applicant may or may not remain. So my advice is, try to see if there's a way to negotiate to get a project which either the town or the residents or the applicant are ever going to be perfectly happy with. But the ZBA feels is the best it can do in terms of the 40B guidelines and requirements.
Okay. So did everybody hear that within reason? I mean, the applicant always has the right to appeal anything that we do within reason, correct? And so, and
Ed, I'm sorry, could I add one more thing?
absolutely.
I just want to iterate how difficult a position the ZBA members are in. This is a very gray area. It's not like sitting on a planning board where if a applicant doesn't comply with the zoning bylaws or subdivision rules and regulations, a planning board can simply deny the project. It's very black and white. The applicant, I suppose, could then go to ZBA and ask for a review, but that's pretty unusual. Here the board really has to balance whether it's better to negotiate a deal now or be subject to the risk of the applicant going to the Housing Appeals Committee. And that's not an easy job.
Just for my edification, when an application or an applicant goes to goes to HAC, is the ZBA represented? We've never had one go to HAC, so I'm unfamiliar.
Yes, you would be represented.
Yeah, but that was because the neighbors sued Abrams, and anyway, never mind.
You would be represented, yes.
Okay.
Yes, you would be represented.
Right. Okay. Well, anyway, so there is a process. There's a state law. We don't make this stuff up, and
I should say that there's a history and a lot of chime in. The HAC very often decides in favor of the applicant unless there is a clear health or safety or other local issue which overrides the regional need for affordable housing.
Yes, and I know that it's hard for you to hear me. I did make that point earlier. There needs to be a local concern that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing in the event that the board finds itself before the HAC and there is a condition that's been imposed that the developer can prove renders the project uneconomic. And it is a heavy burden of proof, and the burden of proof is on the ZBA.
Okay. So hopefully that addresses to some extent the last gentleman's concerns, but let's hear from the next one.
Hi, my name is Steve Calabrese. I live at 2 Morgan Square in Surfside. And Mr. Chairman and board members, this is more a question. Since this is the time of articulating critical issues, there's one that's been obliquely touched on by a lot, but not really articulated, which is the impact of this, or the threat of this, on the future economic well-being of the island. And as said, it seems to be so out of keeping that is it possible that if you could conceptualize that as a critical issue, would it be possible to have a peer review of just that, the economic impact of such a thing that seems to be so out of keeping in character on the nature of this island as a vacation destination, and it's that vacation destination tourism which is the lifeblood of the Nantucket economy. So I hope that's clear. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, it was clear. I don't know if
it seems. I mean, if you know, to your point before, if people think, people come here from Greenwich, Connecticut, and they go, "Oh boy, this looks like Cape Cod." That's the end of the island, basically. I mean, everything depends on people coming here, building vacation homes, and summering here. So I don't know if that has traction, but it just occurred to me that that's kind of a very general thing that could be a critical issue. I don't know if it's ever been addressed.
It's a great point. It's a great point. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, actually, it's an excellent point, I would say. And the case law is very clear in the zoning context, the Gamache versus Acushnet case, which says that the reason why these local decisions are made by a local board, with local board members such as yourselves, is because you are familiar with the local conditions. And so in a normal zoning context, there is that presumption that you have the familiarity and you have a great deal of discretion. With respect to a special permit, you have a great deal of discretion. With respect to variance relief, you have a lot more discretion. Here, within the 40B context, you certainly have far less than in either of those two contexts. And I think it would be very worthwhile for the board to gather information and to have it in its record and reflect it in its decision to the extent that it's relevant and important to the ultimate decision that you make about the welfare of the island with respect to the life's blood being the tourism industry. Facts and circumstances in that regard certainly should be gathered, and findings of fact in that regard would be very important. And the impact that you think that this may have on that, given its location and so forth, that should all be within the fact finding that you make.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Okay. Another audience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Dave LaFleur, a butter at 104 Surfside. Of course, we have a lot of concerns about this. One of our primary concerns is our well water. According to Surfside Commons plans there, we have a well 82 feet plus or minus from paved parking. I encourage you and hope that you'll review their hydrologist report, the engineering for water runoff, very important. I'd like to make aware to you of a case, maybe town council knows about this case, Reynolds versus Stowe, Massachusetts, ZBA, where a approved 40B project was overturned because the developer could not guarantee the safety of the abutter's well. I don't know the particulars about that case, maybe she does, but these are just some concerns we have, very strong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, what the Stowe case said was that where there was a local regulation, the particular property happened to be in a watershed protection district, and there were very specific performance standards within that district for contamination. and there was a packaged treatment plant proposed, and the ZBA gave the comprehensive permit and said, well, it was shown to us that this packaged treatment plant was going to go forward, has to meet the requirements that the state imposes for that kind of treatment plant, so we'll rely upon that, and we're going to waive our local, perhaps more strict requirements. Went up to Superior Court, and the Superior Court agreed with that because the abutters appealed. Notwithstanding the fact that one or more of the abutters, interestingly not the plaintiff, but one of the abutters, actually showed there was record evidence to show that one abutter would be impacted in a way that would be protected under the regulation, but not under the state requirements for the packaged treatment plant. And so ultimately, the appellate court held that it was a local concern that outweighed the regional need for affordable housing, that there was this local concern to protect the local well water, and certainly there's a presumption normally that the state regulations are sufficiently protective, but what the appellate court held was that that was not the case in that situation because the evidence was clear that the contamination would occur. And so the court found that that was an appropriate local concern. So certainly you would be looking at every local requirement and determining whether or not it is a local concern and whether there are facts that would lead you to conclude that it is a local concern that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing and whether or not there is some mitigation that could be imposed that would take care of it.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to talk about this at this point? You all can do it later. What do we think? Ask for some more information and move on? Okay. I think one other thing I'd like to do is set up, I have never been to the site, driven by it by hundreds of times, thousands of times, but I think we should set up a site visit. I would like, if possible, to have the lot lines staked, at least the corners. If that gives you enough information, that'd be adequate. But I would think that entire lot line would be good. I think staking the building locations as they're presently drawn would be beneficial. And I think some sort of height pole, which would be difficult, or maybe balloons that are set at the height. How do you confirm that? I mean, how does I guess you would have to pull the string down and measure it, I guess.
No, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, not that they wouldn't.
I'm going to have faith that the applicant is going to do the right thing. I mean, what else can I ask for? Computer graphics of the, again, I alluded to that in the whole site situation. If you can get us some better graphical representation of what's there and what you're proposing, because right now it's pretty clear to me, but it might not be clear to everybody. Okay, so are you amenable to that suggestion as the owner / developer?
Site visit, sure. All the property lines are staked at this point, the corners as well as the midpoints. I'd have to take a look at trying to do some coordination on the building locations and so forth. But if if in the short term people wanted to schedule a site visit, I know everything is staked to at least.
I'm talking maybe 2 weeks from now, so that you might have
a
chance to get the building staked and the height 2-3 weeks from now, just before the next meeting.
You want to include the clubhouse and the function patio with pergola in
Just
that?
the clubhouse, right?
Just the clubhouse.
Just to give us a point of reference.
Go ahead.
Did you want to bring up the mailboxes?
Oh, well, you mean have them staked where they are?
Well, no, just the fact that it seems it's a concern of yours.
Yeah, so this, just the mail, this is just this one, you just have one mail?
I will say we haven't done a lot of research on that. What we find in a lot of communities now is the post office wants a central location for mail. So it was really put on the plan just to indicate a central location. But if there's a more appropriate location or another way to do it, It's probably a combination of talking to
I don't
the.
think the size of it is appropriate or adequate. But
There are a couple other little site things that we'll
Yeah.
drill down on. Let's take a look at
Okay.
the bigger picture. And what about the height situation? You can set up something.
Yeah, let me look into that and try to figure out an
All right,
approach
we'll
to
give
that.
you adequate time. I would say, hold on one second. Look, it'll probably be 3 weeks from now, which would give us a week before the next meeting kind of thing. What about having the public welcome to that event with the caveat to the public that we can take no testimony, no discussion at the meeting, nor can we deliberate at that type of meeting. But it's I believe it's at the discretion of the.
No, we're happy to do. We've had a site visit before when we did the Pell. We had one with the state, and the public was welcome and invited. So just a matter of trying to coordinate that.
So we'll set up a time, or we can set it when we set the next meeting date, and we'll work back from there.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, on that one issue on the site visit, so there's not a duplication of efforts, the HDC does regularly, as Lisa knows, take site visits. We demand height poles when the buildings or windmills and stuff have been used that have been over the safety of setting up a height pole, which these are. We have used balloons to show us where the height is. We did it with the both of those windmills out at Bartlett's and out at the school. So that has been very effective as to height, because those 55-foot high height poles are not going to be safe. But we'd ask that we are informed as to what time and day this site visit's going to take, so the HDC can post a 48-hour notice and also come, so we can just all see it at the same time, because we're going to be needing to address that. And rather than him putting them up and taking them down twice, it's easier if planning board maybe also, but certainly the HDC knows.
Yeah, we're going to try to set a date today, so everybody will know when it is. And then, and your comment leads me to the next one. I believe we need to make a motion as a board to get written commentary from various town boards, and or not boards, but town entities. I'm going to list some, and they may or may not be enough. So if anybody has anything else, please jump in. The fire department, Wanacomment Water, the planning board, the HDC, the town engineer, the DPW, the transportation planner, and the Board of Health. Police? We'll add the police. And again, all they're going to comment on at this point, obviously, is the plans that have been submitted. So, but I think we'll get a general, broad brushstroke of their concerns at that point. Is that right, Eleanor? I have to ask for a motion to, and the board needs to then vote on that?
Yep, and you will sign the letter that we will draft.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with that? So will someone make that motion?
Make the motion.
Michael seconds it. Any further discussion? Any discussion in the audience about that?
Can you add the Planning Commission, MP&EC, because it was brought up by Mr. Calabrese that there was an potential economic
Good
impact
point.
on the Planning Commission.
Good point.
Does that?
NPEDC. Okay.
And you might want to get one from the selectmen. We used to include them just because.
Well, I think we got the selectmen's viewpoint.
We got the letter, but that letter was addressed to somebody else, not you.
Okay.
It's not going to hurt to include.
BOS, Conservation Commission. Anybody else? If we're forgetting somebody, can we? Sewer?
Attic Clause and any other applicable local board.
Yeah, and any other applicable local board.
But not that the building department wouldn't be required,
No,
because it's.
I don't think so.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, one more. I remember when I did it the last time, there were 15. I can't remember what they are now, but there are 12 now. I think traffic safety was also asked to weigh in on that because they deal with the intersections and the flow of
in there.
Okay, well, we'll fit them under others. But anybody who has further suggestion, feel free. We'll get it to Eleanor, and we'll ask the appropriate groups to comment by net.
The only other thing I'd add, in your letter to them, you should include a date certain as to when you expect to receive those comments.
Yes.
Would like to receive those comments.
Ideally, again, a week before the next meeting, so we, the applicant, everybody has a chance to review them. Does that seem reasonable?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do the packet on the Friday before the meeting, so yes, but the week before the meeting would work. It's tight, it works.
Actually, Mr. Chair, if I could comment too, I think to be productive, if set whatever date you feel is appropriate for a response, we'd actually like to be able to take those, and we may actually end up, playing with the plans, modifying things, and actually doing some work so that we could actually come before the board in a more productive way. So, if we could, even if it means the next meeting's out a little bit further, I think it would be helpful for everybody if we had maybe probably at least 2 weeks between when the comments come in and whatever that hearing date might be. So I'm not trying to rush the hearing by any means. I'm happy to do whatever makes sense, or I don't want to rush the comments. I think what we'd like to do is have really the best set of comments we have, as well as a reasonable period of time so we can evaluate those and be able to come before you, with some new ideas and concepts.
Yeah, thank you. What do we... Arthur, do you want to say something on this?
No, I was simply going to say that I know that the next scheduled meeting doesn't work for several of us, and we would our suggestion would be either that it be continued until the March 10 meeting, or that there be a special meeting date set up by the board, as sometimes has happened with 40Bs. I leave that obviously up to you, but the 10th of March would in fact work for us.
Would you be willing to give us an extra month on the backside of the 180 days?
Yeah.
I think at this point we'd prefer just to see how things play out. It's a little early to be asking for an extension in my experience.
I'm not asking us not to meet for a month.
Yeah, you're asking us to put off for a month, so we're asking to just bump it out a month.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
So that's an extension?
Excellent. Yeah. No, I think we'll do the extension. But I will actually, March 10th, I realize, does not work for me. I don't want to go to the 8th. Is there a date maybe in late February?
Yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get to the dates in a minute, because we're all going to have to
check our schedules.
Because I have a one-way ticket to Mallorca. I'm not sure I'm coming back.
I don't blame you at all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look at dates in a minute. So yeah, I didn't have any other. The next meeting, the waivers we talked about. We're not going to deal with that. The letter.
And the only other information, I think we had asked for just the council opinions on the deed restrictions. Right?
Yeah. The opinion on the opinions on both the sewer issue and the restrictions that may or may not be in play. They would be part of what we're looking for too. Okay, so anyway, let's talk dates. Thursdays are not great for Ed, but I think he can. I would prefer to, in large measure, to have him here if it does work. Eleanor?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I was emailing this morning with the person who handles this room
Yes.
about potential alternatives as to later in the day, so working people can come and other people. So that is in the works. It's just a complicated Venn diagram of figuring out what works for everybody. So I have begun that process, but I won't have an answer definitively. So having a bunch of suggested dates would help me to narrow and do that.
Well, we have to go to a date certain. So can I suggest we would go to the next meeting, regularly scheduled, with the thought that Arthur shows up or somebody to
continue.
Although then you wouldn't know what
No, I think that works. Actually, neither Mr. Schwartz nor I will be available on that date. So we'll be. So my client will be sadly deprived of effective assistance of counsel at that time. So please treat him gently. But in any event, if it continued to that date certain, with the understanding with everybody here right now that it's not actually going to go forward on that date, and that at that time a specific continuance date would be established, in addition to which people would be able to get that information from Eleanor, I think would be the best way to handle it under these circumstances.
So that, does everybody clear on that one?
Can you give us the HDC and the planning board a date?
That's what I'm trying to do, I thought.
No. She's talking about the site visit?
She's talking about, no, wanting comments by.
Yeah, no, I would, I'm not on the HDC, or, thank God. What is reasonable for a town board turnaround? 3 weeks?
From now?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, that's.
Because we're meeting, the next 2 weeks we go to town warrant. So then, once we get that done on the 28th, hopefully, we'll have a little bit of time to have another meeting. But I would think that if you're not going to take any of that stuff in until March 10th, maybe March 1st, that gives you 10 days before your meeting.
Well, I think the applicant made a great point, that if we're, as a board, hoping for some, change, maybe, the more time the merrier for them to actually make informed decisions as to what may or may not work. So I think 10 days is not adequate, personally.
I'm willing to give more time for thoughtful opinions about the restrictions in the sewer issue, thoughtful letters from all of these town boards that we're asking to respond to us, and also, a thorough and thoughtful, hopefully some sort of redesign based on, or some level of redesign based on the concerns that we've expressed. So.
Right, but I think there needs to be a reasonable turnaround time.
Oh yeah, totally. I agree. I'm just saying, I agree with you. 10 days, I think, is.
So if it, just hypothetically, if it went to March 10th, the continued one, if Ed can make it, or the 9th, or in that area, working back 2 weeks would be
24th.
24th, 25th. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
But
5 weeks, 6 weeks from now. I would hope we could get some input by then.
Well, I mean, I think if people,
Because at least 4 of these entities have to.
I'm going to give you a date. Thank you. I should stop equivocating, is what you're saying, and just give you a date. It makes sense to me. Let's do February 24th for the information from the town boards. That's when we would expect to be able to forward it to you.
Okay. And then have a meeting scheduled for what? Let's see.
So you want
McKinnon is not available that first full week of March.
Well, no, actually, the first week of March I could do. Well, I guess it's the 29th to the 3rd. It's that week of the 7th I can't do.
Keep in mind that a lot of these people have kids. That's school vacation week.
Which one?
Which one?
So you're going to want to go
The
after
7th.
the first week of March?
That's school vacation in Nantucket?
No, it's February.
Runs into March.
No.
Not very well.
I don't know. I don't have a child in the school.
Okay. Let's decide on the next continuance. I mean, somebody could be sick by then. It's.
But you want the information from the town boards and then some time to prepare.
Yeah.
Exactly. That makes the most sense.
So I'm saying plus or minus the 10th, but not in March.
I'm going to be gone until from probably the 10th until the 20th.
So March?
Of March.
It's not on a ZBA hearing. I would stay for the 10th, but my daughter's off that next week from school, so I was going to go away. So it shouldn't be the week of the 13th.
All right, let's do this. Let's get the comments on the 22nd. That's still 1, 2, 3. No, 22nd. This is going to be maybe humorous to some people. My wife is watching and telling me we're going to be away certain times. I don't like Big Brother.
Rachel. That's so
That
funny.
is not right.
She's always.
So when are you going to be away?
Viewership is one. So now we know who it is.
No, that.
She's always watching you, Ed.
God, that's anyway. So I got totally off track there. The 22nd. So that gives you 1, 2. And yeah, so let's say the 9th or 10th. Or that's the week you can't.
That's the week that Mr. McKinnon will be away.
Okay, we can't
I'm
push
away
up.
the week of the 22nd, so if remarks are submitted on the 22nd, I will not be here to
Of February?
send them out.
Can we ask for them on the 15th?
Sorry.
That gives them until
That's
that first
4
week
weeks.
in March. That's 4 weeks.
And then would it be possible to meet during the week of February 28th?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. That way you would want to get the comments on like the week of the 15th, and then that would give you 2 weeks to.
February 15th, by the way, is President's Day this year.
Well, I mean, I'm saying thereabouts. I work President's Day, but I don't know. 16th.
Yeah, but I don't think the town does, so.
16th. Is that enough time? Are you
Well,
Are you
Linda
here?
did bring up a good point that some of these boards are going to have a meeting.
ACC's going to have to schedule a special meeting. Planning board's going to have to schedule a special meeting.
So maybe we just.
All right. Well, let's
gonna have to
just
happen somehow.
It's going to have to be the third week in March then.
Okay, yeah, it'll be the 3rd week. That works. Okay, so the 22nd for the comments,
And that gives you then a month, if they could.
and then we'll meet on the
22nd?
17th of March.
No, I'm gone that
Oh,
week.
you're gone that week.
Sorry, the third full week of March.
All right.
Well, you can watch the tapes if you have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's
I
be
think I'll
careful.
be here the 10th.
about-
That's your regular meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the applicant can't be here.
They can't be here.
We're making this too hard.
So if you're doing it on a Thursday, and I mean, there's no law that says it has to be a Thursday, but the Thursday that would be available sounds like it would be March 24th,
It works for me. If everybody's
which is
good
all
with
right
that.
with us.
And just for what it's worth, I gotta be out of the country, but
I get. Yeah, actually,
I shouldn't
I couldn't do the.
delay.
I can't do
You can't do the 24th?
I can do the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, or I can do the week before. That's just.
But Lisa can't do that.
Okay. How about the 22nd or the 23rd?
That's fine with me.
Let's tentatively say that. We're not setting those dates right now anyway, but let's tentatively say that that week. And we'll have to deal with the fact that Ed's calling in from wherever he is.
What about the
March
site visit?
24th is available for a late afternoon meeting if we would like to do that.
The 24th we can't do. It's the 22nd or 23rd.
Some of us may have to, we're, somewhere in this process, somebody's going to have to read in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fine. You guys can go ahead without me that day. I don't.
I mean, because some of the discussion may, but anyway, we'll get to that. All right, so February 22nd for the comments. We'll
Could we also see if it's possible to get the traffic study completed by then?
No. Can't be completed by then because they've got to do the counts in August.
No, this is a peer review of what they've
Peer
submitted.
review.
Yeah, if we determine we need a traffic study, we're going to have to go to Plan B. So we're continuing this particular hearing to February 11th, correct?
Yes.
At which point we will
continue again.
make a new date with, and everybody will know their schedule.
Did we set the site visit?
The site visit, that's a good point. Time, 1 o'clock. What about the site visit? How long will it take you to, you think, get the balloons and party favors up? Mr. McKinnon, sorry.
Can I work that out with Eleanor? I just need to talk to a couple of people. Do you need
I
to?
think we need a date on that, don't we? Or do you just notice that in the paper? No?
Yeah. But,
It's not a public-
no, but you could post it on the 40B site and things like that, and, yeah.
I would rather pick a date if we
The
could.
public is invited. You just you'll get the date through Eleanor.
It's not a public hearing.
No,
It's
but
like-
that-
there'll
but
be
they're
no
invited.
discussion, no
I already
deliberation.
went over that. Let's not go over everything.
We want to
I
make
did
sure the
over.
public knows about it.
I said it to the public.
I know. I'm not talking to you. I was just.
Okay, so site visit. What are we thinking?
So what do we think, like 2 weeks?
Well, does it want to be
28th?
that far in advance of, yeah, I guess so, because then they want it, from that site visit, then the town boards will make their comments?
Yeah.
It's a good point, too.
So how about the
How about February 1st? It's,
Second, let's do it on Groundhog's Day.
Groundhog Day, we'll see if there's any shadow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
February 2nd?
I mean, if for some reason it absolutely doesn't work, let us know. February 2nd at 10? Or in the afternoon? What is everybody's
I
pleasure?
was thinking you want to do it at like lunchtime, so people who are working might be able
Works
to
for
scoot
me.
out and
Lunchtime.
Like 12:30?
12:30.
Maybe it'll be warmer.
That way we might be able to get more people from the public.
12:30.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
I'll make a
thank
motion.
you.
Make a motion to continue?
Hold on. Do you want to say something before we do anything? Yeah, so we're making a motion to ask the boards to get us information by February 22nd.
Yes. I will be out offline on that whole week, but
Kay or somebody will be able to do it.
I'll get somebody, I'll delegate somebody to get it to DJ and.
Yeah, as long as we can get a copy of it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's the first motion. Who made that motion? You,
Karen
Mike?
and
Karen?
Mike.
Okay, so then I asked for further discussion. We did, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so then I need a motion to continue to the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is 11
I'll make that motion.
at 1 p.m. Lisa makes the motion. Michael seconds it. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay? And I have, this is the extension. I accept. Do I need to sign it? No. Okay, but we don't need to make a motion or anything, do we? Okay.
Yeah.
So here is the, I, Steve Schwartz, counsel for Surfside Commons, extend the date 30 days. Okay?
Yep.
So can someone make that motion to
I'll
accept
make that
this?
motion.
Susan makes the motion. Hiram seconds it. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Raise your phone. I love it.
Thank you.
We motion to adjourn? Can I make a motion to adjourn?
No, but we want to ask you one more thing.
Okay.
So we don't,
Are we-
we don't go out of session, we go right into executive session.
Okay.
Well, that's
So we're
the
staying
end of
on.
our agenda today. Right.
Not yet.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't get them.
Mark, Jim, don't leave yet.
They're over here. Eleanor?
Someone gave it to me.
Is that the end? The decision? Okay. Ready to sign either of those or no?
He's gonna be right back. Let me go use the bathroom.
Oh, my goodness.
I brought them, but I thought.
Thank you.
Yes, I do.
I love that. No, thank you. Yes.
You get one of these?
Ed, are you still on the line? Okay. No.
Okay, I'm doing fine.
Check 1, 2. He's gone. I think he said other stuff on it. Okay.
Hey, Ed, do you want the map?
Yeah, please.
We're still in.
Okay.
So we're finished.
Did you take
What? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And then you're going to talk to you if you want. Oh, you are? All right. Okay. Never mind. False alarm. Michael's going to make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we adjourned.
We almost are.
Make that second.
I had to pee.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just going to be
I assume we're going to have other agenda items.
We will, but I only have one application right now.